Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories Podcast. I'm your host, John DeLynn. I'm here with my partner and co-host, Margie. Hey, Margie.
Hi there.
Today, our episode, we're live recording on location in Knoxville, Tennessee, or near Knoxville, Tennessee. And this is going to be a two-part series from Knoxville, Tennessee. Today's episode is about a standard, normal Mormon couple, in this case from Knoxville, Tennessee, or living in Knoxville, Tennessee, who has a faith journey and ends up being threatened twice with excommunication. So what in the world would just cause a couple not trying to make waves, just going through their own faith journey, be threatened twice with excommunication? And then also, like, what does it mean to have sort of this down-home, multi-generational Knoxville, Tennessee Mormon family? What does it mean to be the first in a family like that to struggle with their Mormon faith? And what are the implications of that? So that's kind of what today's episode is about. For this interview, we have Lindsay and Todd McCormick. Hey, guys.
Hi.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for coming out.
Y'all may remember that months ago, we interviewed Bishop or former Bishop Nathan Hinckley to talk about his interactions as a former bishop with his stake president. Well, Nathan Hinckley is the brother of Lindsay McCormick. That's your brother.
That's right.
So we have, as part two of this series, we have interviewed Nathan and his daughter, Kaylee, about their journey as kind of a father-daughter couple. And the teaser or the thumbnail for that episode is my dad ruined my Mormon wedding. So that's going to be, y'all are already laughing. We've actually already recorded that episode. We recorded it before this one, but this one's going to air before that one. But anyway, it's a two-parter, a Knoxville special. But they go hand in hand, because what you'll learn in next episode is that Lindsay and Todd let out in their faith journey right around the time that Nathan was bishop. And of course, this is a very close, the Hinckley family in Knoxville is a very sort of a pillar Mormon family in the branches, wards, and stakes here in Knoxville area. So it's kind of a Knoxville two-part Mormon story with these sub-stories. Anyway, that's the intro. But if you're just looking for a down-home couple in a Mormon, their own Mormon journey, Todd and Lindsay McCormick, that's what we're here to talk about today. Thanks for coming on Mormon Stories Podcast.
I'm excited to be here.
Anything y'all want to add or take away or correct from my intro?
No.
Sounded
I
great.
think so.
No? Okay. All right. Well, if it's okay, maybe let's start with you, Lindsay,
Okay.
because there's kind of this Hinckley Knoxville focus.
Okay.
Like, can you tell us a little bit about, the Hinckley family lore and history as it relates to Mormonism and Knoxville, Tennessee,
Sure.
as a starting point?
Yeah. Well, my family goes all the way back to the roots of Mormonism with Joseph Smith, and I mean, not Joseph Smith, but Hinckley's go back to his time.
And we mentioned that Gordon B. Hinckley was a prophet of the Mormon Church, and he's well known. It's that Hinckley line in some way.
Yeah,
right?
he's our second cousin 3 times removed.
Yeah.
So when I moved to Utah with the last name of Hinckley, everybody always asked me that. And he was prophet at the time. So it was pretty fun. So yeah, we have a lot of ancestry in the church. And Arza Hinckley, he was our direct grandpa. He was very instrumental in a place called Cove Fort. Cove Fort, is that what it's called? It was Brigham Young's kind of in between fort between Salt Lake, I think, and St. George or somewhere.
Yeah.
Over in that area. And so he was kind of Arza Hinckley was kind of a big deal down there. So as far as that goes, but Tennessee, my family is from Utah. My parents are from Utah. They actually went to the same high school as Todd, not at the same time.
Layton, is that right?
Layton High, yeah. Mm-hmm. And anyway, they started their family in Utah. My 2 brothers were born there. And then they ended up in Georgia and had me. And then we ended up in Tennessee. My parents are musicians, and they raised us on music. So Hinckley family lore is all about music, fun, dominoes, that's kind of what we're all about.
I joked with Nathan that it's kind of like the hillbilly or Appalachia Osmonds, right? Which I'm sure doesn't fit, but I'm curious, why didn't they settle in Nashville instead of Knoxville? Any idea?
We were there. We had I think we went to Nashville first after Georgia, and they sang at the Opryland Hotel for years. And then they got a job at Dolly Parton's theme park. And so my brothers and I would just go in the summers all summer long, and we would just ride the rides while my parents were singing at event picnics and things like that for about 11 years. So that's what we did. And that's what kind of brought us to the Knoxville area, because it's closer to Dollywood.
Knoxville's closer to Dollywood.
Yeah, it's closer to Sevierville and Gatlinburg and all that.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was the Hinckley family culture like from a Mormon perspective growing up in Knoxville?
Yeah.
How many siblings?
So 3 brothers and me. I'm the only girl. So 2 older and then 1 younger. We were Mormon. We were not super Mormon, but we were in, and we believed it. When I say we weren't super Mormon, we didn't do like FHE every Monday. We didn't really say family prayers, but we did say, prayers at meals. And we went to church every Sunday. We went to our activities and things like that. And, back then there were a lot of fun activities. There was softball, and there was, road shows and lots of music opportunities and things like that, dances and all of that. And so we all really enjoyed it, especially my brother Nathan. He met his wife through the church. And so growing up. So yeah, for me, I definitely believed in it, went and everything. Wasn't my first group of friends or anything. I had a couple of really good friends there, but I kind of did my thing in high school, and most of my friends were not LDS at all.
So like the typical, I think the majority of our Mormon Stories interviewees didn't have regular family meetings. So I think that's more normal because it's hard to do.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But in terms of like coffee, no coffee, right?
Oh, right. Yeah.
And alcohol.
Mm-mm.
And like rated R movies.
No. Well, my dad showed me one, The Jerk with Steve Martin.
Yes, I remember that.
Great.
And that starts in the South, right? Yeah, right. I remember that.
Yep.
Yeah, that doesn't count.
No.
And that speaks well for your dad, by the way.
Right, yeah.
I love that. I love that movie. And then, but also like, modesty, like.
Well, so I really didn't have a lot of that put on me by my family or even by my ward. I, wore spaghetti strap dresses to my proms. My mom and I would lay out in bikinis on our back porch together. It wasn't really like we didn't have to wear sleeves or wear shorts to our knees or anything like that growing up.
It's interesting because Kaylee's story.
Yeah.
She definitely had that.
Yes.
So,
because I believe,
because Nathan gets
passed down from Amy and Nathan. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. But you didn't have that.
No,
that's interesting. And it sounds like Nathan didn't have that type of parents.
Right.
Which I don't think I totally registered yesterday. But anyway.
Yeah.
That's cool to know. Okay. But 3 hours to church every Sunday and.
Yep. And then come home for souffle, German pancakes. My mom would make every Sunday. And we'd spend a lot of time together outside of that Monday night. I think that was kind of the idea with our family. We just spent a lot of time doing other things, doing music and playing games and just having fun and going on vacations and things like that. So
what about like performing music in like wards and stakes in the region
all the time?
Y'all were known as as a musical performing family, singing spiritual type of things.
For sure. Yeah.
Still are.
Yeah. My 3 brothers had a band together
called
the Hinckley Brothers.
Okay.
Yeah. And
it was mostly a Mormon music, or
I wouldn't say that. My oldest brother wrote most, if not all, the songs. There were definitely some spiritual songs. And I think they probably had one album that was more dedicated to that type of music. And then they've had more country and things like that. I was a little more shy with my singing, but I always did it in the choirs in high school and things like that. And so I didn't really sing a lot with my family. I don't think as a younger kid, like my brothers did. But as I kind of have gotten older, I've gotten more comfortable with it and love to sing.
And she's amazing. She can harmonize like nobody else.
Well, I think I remember her saying at dinner that like she wasn't going to marry you unless you're musical. Right. Is that right?
I would have had no chance.
Like it was.
In fact, somebody just asked me a couple of days ago how I landed Lindsay, and I said I wrote songs and played guitars.
Play the bass at least.
I play acoustic guitar is my main thing.
And he has hundreds of songs.
I play the bass so I can play with Nate.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, your outline just didn't spend a lot of time in your adolescence or young adulthood. So what I took from that is that typical, happy, healthy Mormon upbringing.
Very happy, very
through adulthood.
Good relationships with family and all that.
Yeah, please.
One question I have for you is just thinking about you with three brothers. Mm-hmm. Growing up, were there any real like gendered messages with what was expected of you? Or even like you mentioned in performing, you felt a little more reticent or sometimes not. Like, were there different expectations in the way where there was a rub for you? Or living it, did it feel like at the time you were a girl and growing up, like a good fit? You know what I mean? Like, the gender roles and expectations for boys versus expectations for girls. You have three brothers who sound like, very, I don't know, like full personalities. Yes. And doing all sorts of things. So I was just curious growing up, if you ever, like if you had feelings that way growing up with only brothers and being a girl.
Yeah. Good question. I think because I had brothers, I ended up having a lot of guy friends in high school and things like that. And I would always be the one, like at family trips, for example, that would be going and playing volleyball with the guys while like their wives were, tending the babies or things like that. So I kind of jumped into the guy mode, I think, a little bit maybe. But yeah, as far as having any feelings like that, I don't think I ever felt, like I was a little more shy about singing and about that sort of thing. I think it's probably just a me thing versus like anything about gender. Okay. But there was the expectation for the boys to go on the mission. Definitely not for me. But there was the expectation and the hope that I would, get married right away in the temple, sort of thing.
So when you'll hear when we talk to Kaylee that like for her going to BYU was just not even an option, not even a consideration. She had no interest in BYU, and she didn't want to go on a mission. So she was, relieved about that. I'm giving away tomorrow's next episode. But for you, what were you wanting to go on a mission, and or what was it? Why did you want to go to BYU? Or
No.
Okay.
Okay. So when I graduated, I actually was thinking about going to MTSU, but again, our Middle Tennessee State. Yeah. Okay. A couple of my friends were thinking about going there. We're not a college family. None of us really went. I went to the most college in my family until Kaylee, which was about a year and a half. But I had a cousin had moved to Utah. She had graduated early from high school. We're the same age, and she had moved there in December to go to the University of Utah. And so she just kind of talked me into moving out there. And for me, it's like, I want to go to Utah for the Utah boys, but I don't want to go to BYU. It was kind of a thing, like, made fun of a little bit, Provo kind of Utah culture type stuff.
Hey, that's where Margie and I met. I'm kidding. I'm joking.
Which makes us totally understand.
And then she married a Utah after all.
Yes. Well, I figured I probably would, but just hoping to pull him back, to see.
Okay.
Worked out. Yeah.
So
I moved to Utah right when I graduated.
To find a boy?
I mean, yes, but I would never have admitted that, Okay. But also just to go on and do my own thing. I was going to say, when you asked your question a minute ago, Margie, that I feel like I did kind of carve my own little path growing up a little bit. No one in my family played soccer, and me and my friends, started playing soccer in high school. And, I just had like really good group of friends in high school, and if that makes sense. And my brothers had kind of gone on their missions. And so my little brother was quite a bit younger than me. So I feel like I just kind of carved my own way, kind of did my own thing, and was, my parents were very hands-off in a way, not in a bad way, but just like, trusting. And anyway, that's what I was going to mention.
And did you do photography before you met Todd?
No.
Okay. That was
yes, before I met him.
Okay.
Yes, not
Do you want to talk about that really quick? Because you were a pioneer in photography in Utah, of all places.
Yeah. So I was at a family reunion, and one of my dad's cousins had mentioned that Kitty Candid's in the mall hires all the time for photographers. So I went and applied and got a job there. So that was kind of my first like portrait photography experience, was at Kitty Candid's, which I don't think exists anymore.
And then that developed into...
So then after that, I moved on to another studio. And then after I was a nanny again in California for a few months, I came back to Utah after that and met up with a friend who had said he knew a guy that was a wedding photographer in Salt Lake. And so I went and applied with him, got the job. He was great. He taught me so much. And that's where I really feel like my knowledge of like shooting weddings and, photography really expanded. So I worked for him for a couple of years, and then we had met while I was working for him. And so after that, when we got married, I stopped working for him and then started my own company.
And that's relevant because I think what you told me is that, now there are a lot of women who are well-known photographers in Utah.
Yeah.
But apparently you were one of the first digital photographers.
Yeah. There was like one kind of popular female photographer, Portia, and she was kind of like a big name. But then all the other photographers that felt like were just old dudes, just old guys with the camera, and they were fine and great. But when we started mine, I decided that I would use my middle name, which felt weird because I never went by my middle name. But we just decided make it very feminine, Lindsay Jane Photography, and then we put a slogan on it, a feminine perspective, to kind of just differentiate. It did blow up. We hired like probably 8 photographers and a studio manager, and it was very successful out there.
And you're still a photographer to this day.
Yeah,
right?
retired for a bit to have babies and to build other businesses. And then Kaylee kind of got me back into it because she asked me to shoot her wedding, and it felt good.
Fun. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that gives us a sense for your upbringing.
Good.
Todd, let's bring you in for a bit and just tell us a bit about yours.
So I am a Utah boy, born and raised in Layton. I never know how to say
the
that.
Southern
Layton.
drawl. I'm not. Yeah,
well, I always joke
Layton. It's Layton.
I know. There's no right way to say it. I get made fun of no matter how I say it. By the mountains, right?
Mountains.
I always joke with Lindsay that I'm more Tennessee than she is because I have ancestors that converted to Mormonism near Nashville.
Oh,
and not that far back. I have their piano in our house right now. My Tennessee ancestors. So born and raised in Layton. I had a wonderful childhood. Loved, great family. I feel like the 90s, that's when I was in high school. I felt like it was a heyday for Mormonism. I mean, Gordon B. Hinckley was such a rock star prophet, and it was a lot of fun, a lot of activities, and there wasn't much challenge to it either. So you could just kind of blissfully go along and do your thing. And I loved it. I loved Utah. I loved Mormonism. I went on a mission to France, and that was an eye opener. It was first time I had really been out of the country and started getting some different perspectives. So.
Okay. So overall, a happy, sort of pretty orthodox, traditional Mormon family upbringing in Layton, which is kind of north of Salt Lake City.
Right, 30 minutes north.
Yeah. Okay. Mission, came home, and then how'd you meet Lindsay?
So we met at a party. I was getting into that menace of society age by the time I met.
So you were 22?
Yeah, exactly.
23?
I was 26.
Oh my gosh.
Can you believe it? Terrible. I know. I had a younger friend who was like 22 who was just couldn't believe I wasn't married. And he lasted. He didn't get married till later than me. So, but we met. We met. It was a very momentous day in a lot of ways because it was 2004, and it was the year of Alex Smith at the University of Utah.
Go Utes!
Go Utes!
That's Jeff's favorite quarterback, Alex Smith.
He was amazing. That team was amazing, and it was my senior year at the U. and they beat BYU in Salt Lake at Rice Eccles, which made them bust the BCS. So it was a huge day. I rushed the field. I was down there that day, went back to my apartment and down the street on 9th East, and my friends were talking about going to a party, and I was kind of burnt out for the day. But they talked me into it, and it was in Farmington, and we, I dated a lot of girls and I had a lot of relationships, but I was really kind of shy when it came to meeting a girl, especially one as beautiful as Lindsay. So I remember seeing her at this party and being like, wow, she is gorgeous. And I'm never going to talk to her because I'm too scared of her. But thankfully I had a really uninhibited roommate with me. And I told him, one thing helped too.
Right. Well, it was my birthday. And
it wasn't her birthday party, but it was your birthday.
No, it was my birthday. And I had some friends had taken me to the party, and they made me wear a crown that said happy birthday on it. So anyway, they were kind of actually trying to cheer me up from something. And so they forced me to get out of the house. I wasn't wanting to go anywhere that day, but they forced me to go and forced me to wear the crown. And so that kind of gave him an excuse to come over and talk to me.
So yeah, my roommate and I kind of grabbed her as she was walking by and said, happy birthday.
Hey, birthday girl.
Yeah, hey, birthday girl. And then we got on our knees, held her hand, each of us, and got the whole party to sing happy birthday to her. That's cute. And so that was kind of a fun meeting. Yep. And then it was kind of history from there. There's a lot more to the story, but that's
were you working? Were you in school? Were you working?
I was just about to graduate from the U in finance.
Okay.
I ended up going into real estate I had already started in mortgages and went that route after college.
How long did y'all date before you got Temple married?
9.
It was a long time in some standards.
We were 10, 9 is pretty close.
10. It was 10 exactly. I think,
right.
Yep, it was 10 to the day that we started dating.
What temple were you married in?
Nauvoo.
Yeah. Because there wasn't a Nashville temple?
Well, no, there was a Nashville temple. For me, I had taken so many pictures at like the Salt Lake Temple and all the places in Utah for weddings. And I don't know, I just wanted to be unique and have I wanted a big temple for pictures. It's all about the pictures for me. And so not only that, but it also kind of was representative of like in between Utah and Tennessee, and it's kind of in the middle. And he had an uncle and aunt that were serving a mission there at the time in the temple. So that was just kind of neat. And then we just wanted to make it kind of like a Mormon, like, what's the word?
Mecca.
Well, destination wedding.
Destination,
so like Mormon destination, Nauvoo, Illinois. So
nice.
But it was really cool.
So we made both families travel instead of just one. They were a little upset at us.
We didn't know at the time that they were.
Yeah, we were really
we found out later.
Like, oh yeah, that was kind of expensive for everybody, but it was fun for us.
A couple of them were.
Were you the same?
Oh,
we did the same.
Oh, where'd you get married?
because DC.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, DC.
Yeah. Both sides.
Oh, fun. See, I think it's fun.
Well, and I was kind of a big dreamer, and I didn't want to get married in Utah either. So I loved the San Diego temple, and that's where I wanted to get married. Mm-hmm. But Nauvoo worked out really well. Yeah. And we did all kinds of, we were so Mormon-y back then. And we did all kinds of family history and saw we had tons of connections on both of our family that built the Nauvoo Temple. Mm-hmm. So it felt really, significant and special to get married there.
Yeah.
So in terms of your mutual commitment to the gospel, I mean, you're already checking all the boxes. You're returned missionary, faithful, married in the temple worthy, as much as any of us were, I guess, I'm sure. So I'm assuming when you got married, you were both committed to staying faithful, raising your kids in the church, never leaving the church,
100%.
and making the celestial kingdom someday, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All the normal stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And then you got married 2005, which is the year Mormon Story starts. I like to get a timeline going in my brain.
Okay.
And so let's just say, what year did your faith journey kind of begin? What year would that have been?
10 years after that.
2014. Okay, so between 2005 and 2014, did either of you have any significant moments of doubt or questions about the church?
Nope.
I remember when we moved to West Knoxville, I had a friend that I had just met, and he came up to me and asked me if I think he could tell I was more open-minded because I was open-minded in other ways, just politically and some other. And he asked me if I knew what a New Order Mormon was.
I remember that term.
You didn't. You hadn't heard it.
And I had never heard the term in my life.
Okay.
And I was like, I think he was hoping to find some community in
to.
person, because I think he'd been on those forums and been involved in that. But I feel like we were just not even shakable. Like, we were doing the things and we loved it and we had no problems with it. And it worked well for us. I mean, it was great. It was a great life.
Yeah.
You know?
So through 2014, no significant shelf items, just faithful Orthodox devout Mormons.
The only shelf item I can remember was at a very young age, I found out about polygamy, and I asked my mom about it, and I was really troubled, and she was able to just kind of, smooth it over for me. But that was literally the only time I ever had any issues with the church.
Yeah. Because like, we're going to get into how y'all, this is unassuming, normal Mormon couple gets threatened twice with excommunication. Like, whoa, how did that happen? So what happened in 2014? How did it start?
I think I'll start. Yeah. In our married life, we had started doing our own thinking in general. I think everybody, as they become an adult, they start questioning how they looked at the world. And 2008 was a formative year for us, because we had been living this really great life. Yeah. We were successful. Both of our careers were going really well. We tried for a year to have our first baby, and that was kind of like that was our first trial, but it ended up working out. We figured out why it wasn't happening immediately. So we had our first child, but then that recession hit, and we had just kind of stuck our neck out on for us, a very big real estate project.
Oh,
in Bountiful.
Mm-hmm. And 2008 was, it was severe. Yeah. And I had I was always really conservative financially, and that was my major. I always took a lot of pride in money and how I managed it, and it just demolished our finances.
Yeah. You had so many backups.
Oh, I had, backup plan after backup plan, and I just burned through all of them within months. And then we were struggling. And so, there is something, we talk about it a lot in Mormonism about trials and how they humble you. And that's absolutely true in life, right? Mm-hmm. And so, it caused me to question my financial understanding, which was a core part of my, I felt very competent, and I felt like I'd really messed up. And part of the Mormon side of this is I felt like God was punishing us, or me particularly. So it was really complicated. For years, I struggled with what did I do to deserve this financial trial? It was really, really hard. So we thought we went through kind of different epiphanies with different subjects in our married life, with health and nutrition and politics and finance and
education. Did you say that?
Education. And we've always been both very independent. And so we would kind of do our own research on things and form our own opinions. And, that's what I feel like by 2014 in the summer, I remember just realizing we hadn't really had a spiritual awakening of any kind. Like, we were doing all the things and it was working for us, and we weren't sinning, quote unquote. We weren't having any issues, but I did feel a personal longing for some more spirituality, for something. We had just had so many amazing experiences rethinking a lot of different areas in our life, and that hadn't happened spiritually. And so that, I feel like that started us on a journey. And we go ahead.
When did you move to Knoxville?
Oh, that's a good story.
Yeah,
you go ahead.
Okay. Well, we had our oldest, Josh, in 2008, at the end of just 2008. And then all that happened. And then, let's see, is that right? It wasn't until 2009 that we left, right?
Right.
Because it started to happen. That's right. I had always wanted to come back, at least. We had kind of talked about...
Because all your siblings and your parents were all in Knoxville area, correct?
Right. Yep. And my oldest brother, who had come out there and lived with me, he did meet his wife there, and they lived there for a little while, but they did end up back here too. And everyone else was back here. And I'm a Southerner. I just, really like it on this side. But, he had been to DC as...
I would say France kind of ruined me to Utah a little bit. I loved the green, and I loved the countryside of France. And coming to East Tennessee, and I had in college
it's
before.
Gorgeous here.
It is, right?
So
oh my gosh. I mean, the
rolling
view we're
hills,
looking at,
that drive.
covered by trees. It's crazy.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever seen such dense forestry.
It almost feels like
for so long.
like a jungle or a
No,
rainforest.
I've been to Guatemala. I've seen the Guatemalan jungles.
Yeah.
And this rivals that.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is crazy in 2025.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I had come out to DC and I fell in love with Virginia and the surrounding areas. So I was in fact, when we met at that party, I found out she was from Tennessee, and I was interested in that. I was like, oh, that sounds awesome. And, you know, a really cool area. So I didn't have any problems moving here other than our businesses were rooted in Utah, and my family was somewhat there. A lot of us had already moved out, but
so I had always, we had always planned on coming either here or like Charlotte or somewhere this way,
closer to family. In the South.
Yeah, just closer to the South. Yeah, and family. And me with my mom and having babies and things like that. When we had Josh, she was trying so hard to get there for the birth because it was her only daughter's first baby. But he came like 3 weeks early and just super, super fast. So anyway, she was on the layover on her flight, and that's so we're on speakerphone, and that's what I had. So she kind of experienced it. But anyway, so I wanted to be close to my mom. We were very close and all of that.
So 2009.
So 2009, he came to me in November, end of November, and he just said, we got to move to Tennessee, just out of the blue. And I knew, and the plan had been about 3 or 4 years from then is when we would do it. But he just said, okay, we're moving. And he was, stressed about it. But I was just like, oh, yes, like super excited. But it was, he said, no, like when we go home to visit for Christmas, like we're staying. We need to stay.
Nice.
And he felt very strongly about it. And I was like, okay.
So between 2009 and 2014, what was the Mormon dynamic with you and your parents and your siblings in Knoxville?
Oh, I mean, we moved right in with my parents. So we had our one baby, moved right in and joined the ward, loved the ward. Some of my friends from growing up were still in the ward, and they were raising their kids there. We were there for a year in their ward and in their house before we moved kind of about 30 minutes away to West Knoxville. But no, great. I'm sure I probably had like a chorister calling. I don't even know.
We were very active. We participated in someone getting baptized. We helped with the discussions. One of my best friends from Utah happened to be at UT Law School, and he and I sang we had a cappella quartet in Utah, and we kind of did some of the same stuff here in Knoxville. So we were very active and got integrated really quickly into, Lindsay grew up here, so it was easy to meet, to get connected in the ward.
How often would like the Hinckley family get together for were there Sunday dinners and?
Yeah. I mean, my oldest brother lives in Nashville. And so he when he would come in, of course we'd all get together. We were, every Sunday doing dinners together, anyone that could come, holidays, everything. Yeah.
And I'll just say this last part, like Nathan told us, in the interview, but also just at dinner, that like he would look at other families that had tension or contention and just say, I don't get that. Like I work with my brothers. I love my parents. We all get along.
Yeah.
Like, and this is foreshadowing, but like, he's just like, I can't imagine a family that doesn't all get along and love each other all the time. Yeah. What's wrong with all those other families? Right?
Right, for sure.
Is that also your reflection of how it was?
Yeah,
okay.
Definitely. Yeah.
And if I could give my perspective, marrying into the Hinckley family, it was wonderful because I grew up a great family, but there was just drama now and then, and we bickered and there was, siblings.
Normal families.
I think a normal family, when I came into their family, it was so chill. And they even did difficult things with each other, like work.
Yeah, business. That's the last thing you want to do.
And that's a tricky thing to do with family when you involve money, but they always worked it out. And it's not that there wasn't ever an issue, but they worked it out and it was fine. And they just moved on. And I always felt like they had each other's backs. They had my back.
Mhm.
As soon as I came into the family,
Oh,
it was
they
like, you were in the
welcomed him
club
right in. Yes.
and you're, it was so fun. So fun.
And everyone faithful, right? All the
Yes.
siblings faithful,
Yep.
parents
Everyone married in the
faithful.
temple, all the guys on missions. And
Okay.
my dad. Yep.
Okay. So back to 2013, 2014, Todd, you're starting to feel a spiritual longing to like, where's the beef? Is that right? Like,
yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah,
Like there's, going through all the motions, but not really feeling inspired, just kind of feeling stagnant a little bit.
Okay.
So we started having just I had, you're on your mission and you have deep thoughts, and I had some of those thoughts start coming back.
Mm-hmm.
And then really a big catalyst while we were just kind of in this space where we were starting to have spiritual conversations together. And then
we had 3 kids under like 4.
we had started a business. We had really, the chaotic financial period with the recession that knocked us out for 4 years. We were struggling financially. And then in 2011, we had really what we considered, and I still do, it was a miraculous event in our lives where, we were kind of heading for bankruptcy. I mean, we'd been trying to right our financial ship for years and just weren't getting there. And out of the blue, we have this idea to print photos on wood.
Yeah, there were some friends and family that were really instrumental in kind of helping us figure this
get
out.
Connected.
This business, yeah.
But so that business, shot through the roof overnight.
What's it called? Can you say, or do you not want to say?
Yes. Yeah, Photo Barn.
Okay. And that's kind of was or is a big deal, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is. Yeah.
It's a big national, international thing.
Yep.
National.
Yeah. I mean, our second month of business, we sold 17,000 orders.
Like overnight.
We didn't even have a warehouse or printers yet. That's a whole other story.
Became $1 million annual $1 million+ business
overnight.
Overnight.
And we
wow.
Yeah. And
it was crazy.
So that was amazing, and that saved our finances, but it also was challenging and challenged us in ways we weren't expecting. We had little babies. In fact, we just found out we were pregnant with our third.
Yeah.
Right at the same day that we found out that Groupon was going to run us nationally, and that's what really kickstarted us into.
I remember Groupon.
Yeah,
it was Groupon.
That's what we built our business on Groupon. That's what really, people really hadn't heard of printing on wood before, so it just shot.
Yeah,
it really went crazy.
So just because I don't know anything about this, so they print on wood to then hang it on the wall, or what?
Well, you'll see when you.
Oh, you brought us a gift.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can open it if you
I should have opened it.
you can get
but is it to hang on the wall?
Yeah, hang
mostly
on the wall.
kind
We
of
have
thing?
ornaments and little magnets and things like that. But big pieces.
Yeah,
for
we
the
just
wall and
you could do it. You can do it in your house, and that's what we saw a YouTube video of how to transfer to wood, and it creates a really cool look because you can see the colors in the wood kind of coming through the image. And so that's how we start. We were doing it by hand in our little townhome. I mean, days before we sold 17,000.
How do you sell 17,000 things from your townhome with just 2 of you?
Yeah.
And it wasn't, we were pretty successful in December, and, our ward was super supportive. Everybody who worked for us were members, and so we were in our townhome we were in the kitchen. You had to use water. We were in the kitchen doing that. Downstairs in the little basement, there was staining happening, and the living room was shipping.
This is where Mormonism and or high demand religion comes in handy.
Absolutely,
because you can just go to ward members.
Get a website, right? Oh, that too. Yes,
and you're giving people jobs. You're employing people, but they're helping you.
When we sold the 17,000, we hurried and got a warehouse so we could handle this. And it was the young student adult ward they all came over and were our employees and helped us get through that.
Yes. The church shines. Things like that.
It was great.
Yeah.
And we ended up hiring over years lots of talent from the church to help us build and grow our business.
I think your eventual stake president was an employee, right? We'll get there. We'll get there. Foreshadowing, John.
You said not to foreshadow.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, it didn't end always great. There's cost to hiring ward members.
I mean, I think something that I'm just observing in your story so far is that you have these moments of really kind of extreme things happening to you, like with your finances all of a sudden. And in that case, like Yeah, absolutely. It seems like a negative, stressful event.
Yeah.
And then same with on the successful, it's sudden, and then your stress goes through the roof.
Right.
Yeah. So
Does that keep
interesting
happening?
that way.
It's still happening.
Yeah.
My upbringing, my parents were like 9-to-5er, engineer, school teacher. I was used to
it's given his parents heart attacks.
Give me a heart attack. We're like this. You're exactly right. It's a roller coaster.
Yeah, that's an interesting aspect so far. And then the other thing that's really interesting, if I have it right, is it feels like the story that we often hear, and I think it's true to us too, is deconstruction usually starts within the faith. And then people start deconstructing things like health or the education system. Or that, because the lens with which you start with, you inevitably start applying to other things, or at least you can, right? You deconstruct. It seems like you started elsewhere. Yeah. So it 100%. Started actually in some ways that finance thing that happened gave a lens that then you started applying to all these different things. Yes. And then inevitably you landed on the religion. Exactly. Is that right?
That's right.
That's exactly right. And I don't think, in retrospect, our path would have never gone the way it has without learning the principles of rethinking things and, exercising independent thought.
And critical thinking, maybe.
Critical thinking, 100%. Yeah.
It's kind of dangerous.
It really is.
To faith.
Yeah.
Sometimes. Yeah. Okay. So business goes gangbusters.
Mm-hmm. It goes crazy. And it's a roller coaster. And it was hard. And we're having little babies. So we really didn't have any bandwidth to do anything but that. Raise the kids, get the business off the ground. But 2014, I think there was, we had our youngest at that point was probably 3. So we were probably feeling a little more. The business was finally settled and we had a little time. And I think that's why I was like, we need to maybe think some more spiritually.
I wasn't thinking about that.
Lindsay is, I do want to tell this story about Lindsay because she is a great critical thinker. I feel like for me, I was very much a go along person in a lot of ways, kind of a people pleaser, definitely a people pleaser, just kind of go along to get along. And I remember a time when Lindsay and I were in the temple and she was looking at the scriptures. This was years, like we were young married at the time. And she was trying to study them and understand something. And she was thinking kind of critically about it. Not just like, oh, what does this mean? And why is this saying this? And
I remember that, or was it something in the temple that I was?
No, I think it was in the scriptures, but it could either way. And I remember being a little bit annoyed because I was just kind of like this at the time, really aloof thinker about it. Just like, oh, don't get so much into the details.
Just go with it.
The feeling. The spirit will tell you things when you're looking at the page. It might not be on the page, but it's going to tell you things.
Yeah,
don't get in the weeds.
So she is very logical, very just like super, super smart. And she, you've probably noticed this with Nathan. Anybody who follows Nathan, they're very similar in personality in the sense of, they see through things that don't make sense. And then they question why it's not making sense. And they want to understand what's happening.
Kaylee too.
Yeah.
And Kaylee. Yeah. Yes. So that was really helpful for me, who was a little bit shallower on a lot of those types of thoughts as we started kind of going down the spiritual side. But it was really a Sunday school lesson that kicked us off, I would say.
Tell us.
Want to tell that one?
Yeah, if I can remember.
Okay.
Yeah, we were just sitting there in Sunday school, and the teacher was getting kind of close to saying something about the prophet. It's not necessarily that he can't lead you astray. Is that kind of
the lesson was on 2 Nephi 28-ish.
See, I can't remember that.
End of 2 Nephi, not trusting in the arm of flesh.
That's right. And
it was a great lesson. He was a former bishopric member. He was kind of like a well-respected member of the ward.
Okay, now I remember.
And
it was about not trusting in the arm of flesh. And then was he the bishop at the time? I think the bishop raised his hand. He said, well, hold on. He was kind of getting nervous that this teacher was saying, kind of getting close to, with those.
He was saying even the brethren are flesh is the point.
Because he did bring that up. And so the bishop raised his hand, hold on, we know we can trust the brethren. We can trust the men in the red seats is what he said. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
And we had a buddy sitting next to us and he kind of just whispered, he's like, the bishop said, it's in the scriptures. It's in the scriptures that, we can trust them. The prophet can never lead you astray. And our buddy was like, that's not in the scriptures. Just kind of murmured that. And we were like, what?
I challenged him because I was like,
he's like, of course it is. That's like a pillar of our faith. Like that's of course in the scriptures. So
I start looking and he was right. And that was for me, that, like Lindsay just said, a pillar of my belief system kind of, took a major hit right then. I was like,
prophets are fallible.
Of the possibility that they might be.
Oh, yeah.
And that it wasn't scriptural, this core belief that I held, that I could just trust them. And I did. I just trusted them without thinking, because I could, because that's what the scriptures say. And it really is just in the...
That's what you thought the scriptures
That's what I thought the scriptures said.
We've always been taught.
This is the same friend who mentioned New Order Mormon to me. Go figure. But this was 3 years later. And he's dropping little,
He's still trying.
For those who don't know, there was a website called New Order Mormon.
Oh, there was.
When I was, before I started Mormon Stories, I was like, does anybody know anything about these truth claims problems on the internet? Because I was reading books at Microsoft, lost my faith, had a horrible couple of years trying to work through my own faith crisis. And then I'm like, we need the internet's out there. Can I find anyone else? And how do we use the internet to help people going through something similar?
Wow.
I found New Order Mormon, the website.
Okay.
And it was basically really ahead of its time because it was a forum. It was like an internet forum, which is like a Facebook group, but before Facebook existed. And the website was like, there's a middle way. And I'm like, middle way? What is that? And they're like, yeah, it's not all in or all out.
Okay.
You can be a Mormon, but not believe or do everything you're taught. I was just like, what the heck is that? That's not even a thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it quoted from like Buddhism and Eastern thought.
Oh, wow.
And it was, there's a forum dedicated to helping people find the middle way. It wasn't huge.
Yeah.
It wasn't any stretch the biggest forum out there. But I became a member of that group. Okay. And then I joined a bunch of other forums. And weirdly, when I got excommunicated, somehow, even though that wasn't a really big part of what I did, the New Order Mormon stuff, our stake president like glommed onto that. He's like, are you leading the New Order Mormon movement? And we're like, I know it's some other forum. But like, it was really troublesome that someone was trying to advance a middle way. And now the Restore movement, Patrick Mason, it's all about helping carve out a middle way.
Yeah.
Thomas McConkie and just all those people so anyway, it's cool that you knew someone who was connected to that.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And they were clearly sowing seeds.
I think so.
Maybe not intentionally. I don't know.
But. I think he was. I mean, I think he had found value in and community. And I think that was helpful.
Yeah.
And he was always, he was super respectful, never pushed anything on me, but he would drop a little hint or saying here and there.
I want to know his name, but you don't have to say
it.
You should meet him while you're here.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, he lives here.
I bet he'd like to meet you.
Oh, yeah.
Well, then we would have known each other from the forum.
Oh,
interesting.
Okay.
Well, he certainly knows who you're a very public figure nowadays. But so after that Sunday school lesson, we were just, we're like, well, maybe these guys can make some mistakes.
In theory. In theory.
Maybe, and I remember we did on one of those Sunday dinners, we started talking like that because we were really innocently just like, oh, it's not scriptural. So maybe it's not as black and white as we thought.
Doctrinal.
And that made people very, very uncomfortable, as you could assume. But we kept mulling that idea over, and we
were just interested in it. We were exploring it. Yeah.
And actually then we had 2 Sundays in a row in this Sunday school where that was kind of the theme. And they brought up an Old Testament story about the prophet leading someone astray on purpose and God testing. Yeah, it was crazy. So we were really we were reading the scriptures about it. And anyway, it really kind of added fuel to this fire that was starting.
It's dangerous to take scripture or doctrine. It's dangerous to faith to take scripture or doctrine too literally and too seriously.
Exactly.
Right.
It's like pulling on a thread.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, in a sweater.
And for me, I feel like, okay, growing up for me, I was not like reading my scriptures. I was doing all the right things and I was not doing the things I wasn't supposed to do and all of that. But I really wasn't into doctrine or into any of that. I just, more like just the church. But this is really when I first started to like read, I think. And I mean, I wasn't a big reader in general. And so it just really wasn't a thing for me until this time. And then it became very fascinating. But then I started digging into and just being like, well, wait a minute, being very literal about it.
So you won't believe the next catalyst.
We're ready.
Ready for this? So within a week or two, it was Ward Temple trip. And we went to Nashville. And again, we're just as bought in as you can be, although we're starting to have some deeper thinking happening, right?
Searching for meat.
We are, yeah.
Yes,
not in the context of wanting to change anything about our beliefs, just deepen them.
It
and
was just
get more
fascinating
understanding.
and it was exciting and
And, we were in the temple and this one was on me, but I had an experience in the Mormon temple that was really profound, but it was confusing because it was kind of challenging some of my previously held beliefs about the plan of salvation. And I was really confused by it. But it was equal parts beautiful and interesting, but also troubling because I was like, this is odd. So the second we got into the celestial room, I said, you won't believe some of these thoughts I was just having. And I told Linz and we're talking about it and it led to
kind of like you felt like it was inspiration.
Yes.
Yeah. At the time,
do you want to share what it was about, or do you not want to? Is it too sacred?
I think it's a bit of a rabbit hole, but in short, it was just kind of looking at the plan of salvation. In Mormonism, we talk about the three kingdoms, and that's really what the temple is all about, right? Progressing through the three kingdoms. And I'll tell you the phrase that kind of just jolted me this time I was in the temple was the celestial kingdom, or the world in which you now live. And at the time, I had on my mission, I had made those graphs with spirit world, earth,
still has
death. I still have it.
In French.
Yes, my French version of it. And, the celestial kingdom is a kingdom of glory that you're assigned to after judgment, right? Well, the temple just told me I'm in the celestial kingdom.
So that was super interesting.
And so it just kicked this internal conversation.
Are we in the celestial kingdom now?
And it was like, well, if I'm in the celestial kingdom, then what's the terrestrial kingdom?
What's this?
And how does this all work? So it just started this really fascinating. They're fascinating ideas.
It was a cool idea.
I don't know if there's any value to them or not, but it was fascinating.
It was really fascinating, yeah.
And it let us, again, we had already started kind of finding this love for the scriptures because of that prophet leading you astray thing. We found some little gems in there we didn't know were there. I'm like, wow, that's really fascinating. And I think for the first time, I started looking at the scriptures the way she always wanted to, and I was getting impatient. Critically,
not critically to criticize them, critically to take them seriously.
And to learn
what.
I remember I would teach in my Sunday. I loved to teach, and I loved these. I really wanted to be a seminary teacher, and I would teach the kids all the time. When you're reading the scriptures, it's not so much what's on the page; it's what God is telling you because you have the book open.
You're doing the right thing.
And I know I got that from some of the other leaders, but I had experienced that in my life where I felt like while I was reading, I would have inspiration. And so I didn't read them to really analyze them. I read them to do what I was supposed to and to have that feeling, get inspiration.
Well, the whole Joseph Smith narrative is, if any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, who giveth to all men liberally and upbraideth not, and it shall be given unto him.
Right.
So you're just doing what Joseph did in your mind, I'm sure, right?
For sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But we had, so we started taking the scriptures more seriously, like you're saying.
Yeah.
And it was honestly a really fun and enlightening journey because we were so taken aback by the fact that we had gotten a few things really wrong, like we had misunderstood, and we felt like even the church might have some misunderstandings, even about like the prophet won't lead you astray. We learned that was a Wilford Woodruff thing about polygamy. That's when he said that was. He was doing an about face on polygamy, so he had to say that to keep everybody in, because I can't lead you astray. I know we're going against the last 40, 50 years of teachings, but I can't lead you astray, so you're safe, Yeah. So we started, I feel like it put we were starting to feel this responsibility on ourselves for our own testimony, for our own understanding of the gospel. And so we started, we made kind of this, I don't know that we ever verbalized it, but we made this decision, like, we're going to forget everything that we ever believed, ever thought we knew, and just kind of start over.
We started
scripturally.
We started taking subjects one by one and like, okay, why do we believe this? Or like, where did the garments come from? Just things like that. And then we would kind of dive into the scriptures or to history a little bit and just kind of, rethink it. But it also just like, okay, let's just start fresh and see.
Which mirrored, like you said, Margie, that was the process we had done with other deconstructions.
Politics or economics.
We would really drill down and try to get to some solid ground as we could find, and then learn principles and build on top of that. So that's where we're like, we've had a few things wrong. We need to drill down just to get, and we chose, our logic at the time was we're going to kind of like, the prophets are still prophets, of course, you're not going to let yourself not think that, but they can make mistakes. So we need to use the scriptures as our foundation. And that's really, that was our logic, is like, we can trust the scriptures
until
over even the prophets, because the more we started looking at it, we're like, they have made a lot of mistakes, actually. So
according to the scriptures,
like,
they had,
just following them seems like a really risky idea. And we were like really hyper-focused in this time, like, about our salvation and about doing the right thing. We really wanted to follow God, to separate what was of God and what was of man or flesh.
Just for fun, name 3 of the biggest mistakes you would have identified Mormon church leaders as having made at the time.
At that time?
Yeah.
Polygamy, number 1, I would say.
Pretty quick. We moved really, really quickly. And within a few months, we noticed a scriptural contradiction about polygamy, where 132 contradicts Jacob 4. And
in the Book of Mormon.
Jacob 4.
The Book of Mormon condemns polygamy, and a previous version of the Doctrine and Covenants also condemned polygamy.
Yep. We learned that, and we were like, what in the world?
So you concluded.
It was specifically where 132 says David and Solomon had lots of wives, which was cool with me. And in Jacob 4, it's like David and Solomon did this thing and I was not okay with it.
They were whoredoms or whatever.
Exactly. So there was like a disconnect. So we just started feeling this safe belief system that we were in. We started feeling it crumble. So polygamy was one.
So you concluded that polygamy was a mistake.
Yeah.
Okay.
We did.
What was the other thing that? Oh, well, there was one thing about like the Rameumptom and all of that in the Book of Mormon, which again, I'm not a scriptorian, but it basically condemns going up to a podium and talking about how great you are or how blessed you are. And it was just so weird to like read that and then be sitting in church and just kind of, someone preaching to you. And it just almost was like the scriptures were telling you that's not God's way, to like have someone up in front of you preaching.
Yeah, I mean, that chapter, it rocked us, because it talks about you don't have to have these fancy buildings to worship in. You shouldn't be going up and having just one person speak and elevating themselves above another.
Clothing, fine apparel.
Dressing nice.
We're like, why do we dress so nice? We're wearing suits and dresses.
Yeah, the Book of Mormon condemns consumerism and material culture.
Yeah. Right.
And by that point, we had built City Creek Mall.
Yes.
I don't know if that was on your mind.
That has a little
it was absolutely on our mind.
And yes, it was.
We'll talk more about that.
Okay.
But and it also the Rameumptom story, Alma, it also said they would get up and they would be like, we're so grateful to be so blessed and chosen of you. Mm-hmm. And so here we are, like, taking the scriptures seriously and then starting to see in our own culture and in our own church that it felt like we're going against what the Book of Mormon is teaching.
Yeah.
And a fascinating one was Jesus. Yeah. Okay. We had believed in the Jesus that we were taught about in Mormonism, and looking at the scriptures again, like peeling back what we had imposed upon them and just reading them. Like, I had no idea that I'm getting rusty on my scriptures. I think Matthew 23, I want to say, where Jesus is condemning the church and for having these titles and for sitting in the chief seats. And our bishop had just said, we can follow the men in the red seats, you know, when we're just like,
and watching conference, like, what are those, you know, chief seats up there? Everyone. Yeah.
The more seriously we took scripture and the more we read it, it just seemed like we were living kind of an opposite land where it's like nothing, like we're going against all of this stuff in the, you know, and it was equal parts fascinating for us because we were eating up the scriptures. We loved it. But we were also like kind of horrified because we did not want to leave the church.
Yeah, we were not planning on
it. We didn't want to lose our faith in Mormonism, not at all. You know, but it was like starting to rip apart.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, like a minute ago, you were like, oh, well, let's turn to the scriptures for the, you know, that'll be the, and then as you turn to the scriptures, everything starts to crumble as you're reading it. Yeah.
So ironic, right?
There's zero question that the Book of Mormon condemns the modern corporate Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints
just in your face.
So many ways.
Very expressly.
Yes. So many things.
And there are entire conservative movements within Mormonism that are founded on feeling like believing that the Mormon Church has fallen into apostasy.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that Joseph had it right. And then Brigham and beyond sort of corrupted the church and took it in a wrong direction. And now you need this new leader in 2025 who's been called to put the church back in the right direction. And that's where kind of, I call it Mormon neo-fundamentalism, but it's a thing. It's a thing. It's a big thing. We're talking tens of thousands, if not over 100,000 followers of sort of this neo-fundamentalist Mormonism.
Wow.
And I won't name the branches, but there's, you know, they're a thing.
Yeah.
I mean, Chad and Lori Daybell were going down this road.
Oh, yeah.
And Tim Ballard was kind of going down this road. And even Ruby Franke and Jody Hildebrand were also going down this road. The whole Visions of Glory stuff is part of that as well.
Well, there are some good things about taking the scriptures seriously. And then there are some bad things because you start getting into the Nephi story and, you know, which played into the Lori Daybell situation.
Yeah.
And so, there's good and bad to that. And our journey was really independent. You know, Lindsay and I, for whatever reason, we have worked well together. We got married before we ever owned a business together, but within a few months we started a business together and we've been business partners ever since. And we've started several businesses together and we work really well together. We challenge each other. It's not like there's a yes man or yes woman or whatever. We push each other and we pull at each other and we question each other and we push things forward. So that's what was happening for us within the context of the scriptures was, you know, this clear thinking that Lindsay has the ability to do where she, you know, she'll like, why does it say this? And then it'll get me starting to think about it. And then creatively we'll come up with, well, we think it's saying this. So anyway.
Let me ask this to both of you. So you're in Knoxville, you're super close to Lindsay's parents and siblings who are adults raising kids. Nathan's a bishop by this point, if I'm remembering right, your brother. As y'all were sort of delving into the mysteries and starting to question the modern Mormon church, how much were you talking to your siblings or your parents about these issues here in Knoxville? Or were you afraid to? Or
we were at first, quite a bit.
Talking to them.
Yes, talking to them. Yeah.
And how was that received?
Yeah, for years. It was going it felt like it was fascinating.
Honestly,
they were having some great thoughts and like
they were like, stay away from the mysteries or what are you doing?
No, my dad.
When we would bring up that, I mean, I mentioned the one where we brought up maybe the prophets can make mistakes. That one got shut down real quick.
Right.
Yeah.
But we brought up, I mean, once the blinders kind of start coming off and you're open to a lot more sources and ideas, which is what was happening for us. You know, we had a very strict, small window of information we used to allow, and it's opening. We got into feminine divine, for example, and that was something we really delved into, and it was interesting. Which is
about the Mormon teaching that there's at least a mother in heaven, if not multiple mothers in heaven.
Right. And we really weren't looking at it from a Mormon context.
To us, yeah.
Oh,
not the way we went about it. Because again, it's like we stopped looking through the Mormon lens. We had decided we're going to look at the scripture. Now that we were using the Book of Mormon to influence us, so that, yes, we were still using that as our lens. But but we really had kind of wiped our minds clear of what all the prophets had been saying over the years. But we brought up feminine divine to her family, and actually we had a great conversation with them.
Actually, an amazing moment.
Yeah,
like,
it was.
We all kind of started crying about it. All of us, except for my dad, but that's fine.
Yeah,
but
he wasn't into that one.
It was just kind of like, it felt like a very spiritual moment, and kind of just like a fascinating thing that we were all kind of talking about together.
At that point, were you all aware that women had been either fired from BYU or excommunicated for talking about Mother in Heaven or praying to Mother in Heaven?
I was aware, and I mean, I think this would have been post Kate Kelly, right?
The ordained women stuff would have happened in 2012, 2013. We both got our letters for disciplinary councils in 2014.
Okay.
She was excommunicated in 2014. I was excommunicated in 2015.
Gotcha. Okay. So we were aware of, it's hard to kind of say really quickly, we kind of lost our trust in the church.
Yeah.
Very, very quickly. Mm-hmm. So while we still viewed it as maybe even true-ish, we weren't looking at it as our source, because we had kind of lost trust in its ability to be our source of truth. Mm-hmm. It kind of we'd already noticed they'd burned us doctrinally in some major ways. And so, it wasn't, that's why I say we weren't really looking through the Mormon lens. We were looking through Mormon scripture and through the Bible, but we weren't looking from a Utah
church.
And you were looking into yourselves.
Yeah.
What you thought was true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which
we went
is super dangerous
Yeah.
from a Orthodox faith perspective.
Yeah.
Well, and it is funny you say that, because somewhat early on in this journey, we were warned by a family member. The second you start getting together and reading scriptures and with friends, because we did have some friends that we would talk about scriptures, and that's when these other couples in our ward or stake left. So I caution you not to. And we're kind of like, well, if people getting together reading the scriptures are leaving the church, that seems like that's a bad thing about the church, not about the people.
Exactly.
But there's like decades long history of people starting, we're talking 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s, like in Manti, of people doing these study groups and deciding that they're going to have temple ceremonies in the forest, or like starting polygamy from just reading the Journal of Discourses. Like one of the first people I interviewed on Mormon Stories, the very first video I ever did on Mormon Stories, she was married to Ogden Kraut. She was married to a normal Mormon, but then she started studying the Journal of Discourses. And then she's like, we should be practicing polygamy. And so then she divorces her husband, who wouldn't practice polygamy. And then she marries a polygamist named Ogden Kraut. And then, but it was all through study groups. And so the church, literally, the Mormon church in like the 80s and 90s forbade study groups. They issued a memo saying don't have study groups. Like, how bizarre is that?
Right.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know that there was an official. And so I see where the family members would have been getting that.
That's our heritage, is like, don't study too much.
Yeah.
And in my mind, my Orthodox Mormon brain, the whole time you're telling this story, my Orthodox Mormon brain is saying, avoid the mysteries. Because that's what I was told.
Yes.
Don't get into the mysteries, because they can lead you astray.
Right.
That's right.
So y'all were getting
we were delving
into
it's dangerous waters. For
Anne
sure.
Wild was her name. Anne Wild with an E. Anyway, keep going.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
It's interesting. We looked in, one of the reasons we did a deep dive on polygamy, I mean, we were literally just going piece by piece of our belief system and trying to figure out why it was what it was.
Yeah.
And so we were like, we got to know if polygamy is a thing or not. Not because we wanted to, we were like hoping it wasn't. And it was very clear, again, really quickly, that it's a mess and it's not a thing scripturally. And again, our journey originally was 100% scripturally.
Yeah.
And we had our friends that were doing the same thing, and we did connect online, and we kind of flirted with these neo-fundamentalist groups from a standpoint of, they're also discussing the scriptures. They're also finding interesting things. And, we were so fiercely independent that we never really jumped on any bandwagons, because our journey was always independent, and it remained that way. But it was like, interesting to hear what these guys have to say. And so it was honestly a fascinating and fun journey. And coincidentally, our business had stabilized, And we were burned. Especially me. Linz was having the babies, and I was really getting this thing, as a startup, and it was a mess, lots of drama, and it was hard getting it off the ground. So when it stabilized, we took a step out of it, and it ran itself. And I didn't go in for an entire year.
Yeah, literally.
So you had a lot of time to study.
So we did. And that's while we deconstructed. That's while we were research. I mean, we were literally full-time researchers. And, 80% of it was scriptural. But when you start talking about Mormon ideas, it takes you to the history.
Yeah.
Because you have to figure out, okay, well, when was this idea introduced, and why was it introduced, and who introduced it? So pretty quickly, we started realizing the Doctrine and Covenants was a mess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because a lot of it had been altered, and a lot of it wasn't original, and it was pieced together and manipulated. So where at first we were just kind of like, well, the prophets are good and they're there for inspiration, but we really need to put scriptures first. When we started seeing the type of issues in the Doctrine and Covenants, then we started losing faith in the church.
Yeah.
And the Orthodox Mormons don't know that the Doctrine and Covenants has been changed. There have been entire sections removed, entire revelations where the meaning was reversed.
Yes.
Right.
And even revelations that were given that then they added a bunch of stuff later and doubled the revelations. Like, we have a whole episode on LDS discussions about changes to the Doctrine and Covenants.
Oh, wow.
That people should check out if they don't know. Because it's faith destroying just the history of the Doctrine and Covenants.
Yeah.
So we started cross-checking the Doctrine and Covenants to the Joseph Smith Papers Project, and seeing the revisions and the changes. And again, where we had such implicit faith and trust in the church and its leaders, it really shook. It started shaking the foundations of our belief in the church, for sure.
Okay, so it sounds like y'all got to the point where you were just questioning the church overall.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering how that affected both your Mormon journey, how you ended up in front of a stake president, but also how it affected, Hinckley family relationships. Right. So where's your story go next?
We'll talk about that small thing.
Let's add this little Easter egg in, and we're going to revisit it. But we had a lot of, we had a great word community and a lot of friends. There were a lot of people in our same age group.
Yep.
Young children.
Through parties all the time. I was kind of the hub.
Yeah, Lindsay's very social, so we were getting together a lot. And we, inevitably, we started talking about some of our diverging views. We weren't
natural.
Yeah. Only if we really weren't trying to do anything with it. It was just conversation.
Yep.
And especially my New Order Mormon friend, he was loving having some in-depth conversations with us. But there was one night where we got together for a family home evening, and this was 2014. So this was early on in our journey, fall of 2014. And I think there were 3 or 4 couples there, and the City Creek Mall came up. You had just mentioned that. And we expressed that we were kind of confused by it, that the church was building a multi-billion-dollar mall.
It didn't seem right.
Our kind of, I don't think, and correct me if I'm wrong, you were paying a lot more attention than I was at the time. I don't think they'd really done anything quite like that yet.
No,
it didn't.
Never built a $2 billion commercial shopping mall that the members knew of.
Right. It's become a lot more common these days that they do these large commercial districts around temples and things. But the City Creek Mall for me was problematic, and and the funds where they were coming from was questionable. And I'm from Utah, so I pay attention. I still follow KSL and Salt Lake Tribune. So I'm listening, and I'm seeing there's a lot. I mean, it wasn't just us who were having an issue with it.
It was a thing.
There were members that were writing articles about it, and it was a controversial thing to happen. So we had what we felt like was a pretty tame conversation about the City Creek Mall. And one was with one of our employees who was there at this family home evening.
Also a ward or stake member?
Yes.
Yeah, a ward member.
Okay.
And he told me the next day at work that conversation had made his wife particularly uncomfortable. And I apologized to me, like, oh, we really weren't trying to make anybody uncomfortable. I'm sorry. And so,
just thought that was it.
That was kind of, moved on with life. But that plays a factor in the future. So I will just kind of bookmark that experience.
In a ridiculous way.
Okay.
So every month that goes by, we're getting further and further from our traditional upbringing, right? And we're feeling more and more out of place. Around this time is when Uchtdorf gave his talk about there's a place for you if you're doubting or if you're questioning. And that thing just resonated with us because we were feeling more and more out of place. But we didn't want to leave. We did not want to lose our community, our family. I mean, it was our everything.
Yeah,
you were becoming New Order Mormons.
Yeah,
we were.
I guess so.
It's my friend's fault. He planted the seeds.
Yeah.
No, we held on to that talk a lot, and we would use it. Like we're trying to carve out a space here, and we should be able to be here too.
This was also around the time Kate was excommunicated. I was excommunicated, and the Gospel Topics essays had come out. And the CS letter was about to come out. I don't know if y'all were.
We didn't. I don't think I knew about any four of us.
Okay. That's
Maybe
interesting. This was happening.
We were not your traditional.
Well, most Mormons have never heard of any of this.
Right.
Yeah.
We were.
That's
still,
normal.
Yeah, we were still very much. We weren't really on the fringes of Mormonism globally. We were in the fringes internally, and starting to be noticeable in our everyday life.
Yeah.
But we had some friends that I think noticed we were different and that we were odd, and they were also odd. They were having their own questions. And so I remember one day we were just in the hot tub with a longtime friend of ours, and she was kind of talking about how confusing the word of wisdom was scripturally.
Yeah.
Which is also a thing.
Yeah.
She's like, first off, it says that it's not by commandment. And here we are making it a commandment. And then all of the inconsistencies.
It says beer's okay.
Beer's fine.
And wine's
for
okay.
sacrament. So we noticed she was kind of on a similar journey. She was the scripture. She was putting more emphasis on the scriptures and being confused by the church. And so naturally, we're kind of commiserating together. And very quickly, she and her husband leave the church. Okay. And they were very bold about it, public about it, and like ripped the Band-Aid off about it.
Yep.
And her dad was in the high council of our stake.
Yeah.
In our ward. So you can imagine how that would look to the members of the ward and to her parents, who are very devout LDS, that she starts talking to us. The next thing you know, she's out of the church.
We'd been friends for a long time. She's like a little sister, like 10 years younger than me, and had nannied for us and taken care of our babies and things.
One of our first employees at Photo Barn,
right.
So we had a lot of history with her.
So people maybe assumed y'all were a bad influence.
Right.
And I think the catalyst, even.
Yeah, like the reason that they left.
But it sounds
However,
like you
here
weren't.
we are.
They were flying under the radar. They weren't really attending very much because they were just not. They weren't into it.
Yeah, you always got to find someone to blame when you're a believer.
Oh yeah,
right.
Yep, for sure.
So that was going on, and then someone else new moved into the ward, and who had married into one of the big families in Knoxville, and also she came with her own history, and she was in the process of reading Planted by Patrick Mason. And you don't read that book, right, unless you're
in it.
You're nuanced and you're starting to try to deal with some of the difficult parts of Mormonism. So she really latched on to Lindsay and her friend group, and long story short, this is what starts the kind of the pitchforks coming out
the witch
in
hunt.
Knoxville, because
the first witch hunt.
The first witch hunt. People really started seeing us as a threat because of our diverging views, and because people around us were also having diverging views.
Also, I had stopped wearing garments, and you did pretty soon after that, just reading about them, learning about them, where they came from. And I was pregnant with our fourth. and just never put them back on after had him. And so
you were closeted because you still wore garment-worthy clothing.
Yeah, but you can tell.
Yeah, I think there's garment checking. People
100%.
are very aware of.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
if you're wearing them or not. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
kind of trained to do that. So I think there was a lot of that going on, like people noticing that about me.
And in our logic, how do you justify scripturally the garment? And then you look into the history of it, and that one just fell apart immediately from a historical and a scriptural standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're just like, these things are of man, and that was our of man or of God. Which one is it? This is a of man category.
And kind of took the whole temple down as well with masonry and all that. That was a big one for me.
Dominoes are falling.
Yes,
they're falling fast.
I'm also going to wonder if your financial success would generate some envy or suspicion by other people, because just generally speaking, business or financial success can create either suspicion or even jealousy. I don't know if that's a thing.
That's a very astute observation, because at this very moment, right after we had our fourth, we took this sabbatical from the business and we remodeled our whole house. It was the first time we took any money from the business to ourselves. We're like, we are going to finally pay ourselves a little something for all this work we've been doing. So, and we did a lot of the work ourselves. Her brothers were involved. They're all into, Nathan was there. We were all remodeling the house, and it was a fun project. But yeah, I mean, we turned it from a 90s outdated house to a really beautiful, it was Joanna Gaines at the time. We went all farmhouse with it. Yeah. And it was a lot of fun, but I think you're exactly right. And we let go of a bishopric member who had been working for us.
He was high up. I mean,
he was my right-hand man in the business.
Because of reasons.
With cause.
With cause, although it was a delicate situation, because he's a good friend.
We were friends.
Very close friend. And he was in our ward. And he's the same one whose wife wasn't uncomfortable with us talking about City Creek, okay? And, there were performance issues. And that was 100% the reason. However, I tried to be merciful and kind of made up a different, it's kind of like, we're restructuring and we need to redo the positions or whatever, so that I didn't really, I gave him severance, and I tried to be merciful with the way we handled it and sensitive. I didn't say it was for cause when I did it. I didn't really go over the performance.
I get that.
Yeah. And he even tried to, he helped him get another job.
Yeah.
Which.
Yeah, I get all that.
It was heartbreaking. I put it off for an entire year because I didn't want to let go of a good friend, and I had other people, another guy from the ward worked for me. He's like, you need to let him go. He's a liability to the company. You've got to let him go. And I finally did it. But there was that, that resentment you talk about. So we're remodeling our house. We've just let go of a bishopric member. And there were certainly some of those factors at play.
Yeah.
And then how does that impact your journey church-wise?
I think were you already relegated to the primary at that time? I can't remember.
Think so.
And I had been teaching Sunday school youth, but I was kind of getting a little in trouble in there because I talked about the scriptures too much, things like that. But we were asked to give talks, and I can't remember when.
This would have been January of 17.
Okay. And so we're like, okay, well, maybe they're trying to reach out to us, kind of letting us have a voice again instead of just kind of,
They asked us to do a musical number, I think, in December, and they asked us to speak. So we felt like the ward was like kind of giving us a little olive branch, which was
giving us that space that we had been trying to form for 2 years. So, we went really scriptural on the talks and literally just, wrote them out, and we had a topic, and we got up and read them word for word, which I always would do. He usually would just, riff and do whatever for talks, but he read his as well. As soon as we got done, we sat down, and the bishop stood up and basically, how would you say it?
Corrected Lindsay's talk.
Yeah, in front of the whole congregation. Just made me feel like such an idiot.
Do you remember what you were saying?
Oh, yeah.
He does.
If she defers to me, it's because for some reason I have like
different types of memory.
A memory that remembers these types of details.
I jump in.
So she gave, this really goes, you mentioned, kind of the seeing God. And that's really the thread we were looking at the scriptures, or the lens we were looking through.
Can you develop a personal relationship with Jesus where you could even maybe see Jesus?
Right. Yeah.
And baptism of fire. A lot of times those groups get into the baptism of fire. So she gave her talk on the baptism of fire.
Which is in the scriptures.
Absolutely. It's all over in the scriptures.
And seeing Jesus' face is in the scripture.
And that's more what I spoke about.
Yeah.
And so, but I think the bishop viewed her talk about the baptism of fire as a threat to laying out of hands for the gift of the Holy Ghost.
Yeah.
So he got up to say that, he read some New Testament scriptures to say laying on of hands is how we get the gift of the Holy Ghost. And it really, she wasn't saying anything against it. I never said anything about
priesthood or anything. Yeah.
But the climate at the ward right now, it was right after this first friend left the church with her husband, and it was the other friend was questioning and hanging out with us a lot, and they were nervous about her. And so, we didn't realize it. We were really clueless to the bullseye that we had on us at the time we gave our talks. We just kind of innocently gave them, and we're innocently providing support in our minds and from our perspective to people who were navigating the difficult parts of Mormonism.
Yeah.
In fact, we told the second girl, we absolutely told her, you stay in the church.
Yeah. It's
for her and her situation.
Family,
We never encouraged anybody to leave the church. We were staying.
Yeah, we weren't going anywhere.
No.
So, quick question. During this time, sometimes I feel like it can be detected in a ward if you start questioning.
Right.
And then, your calling changes.
Yes.
So maybe you move from a more prevalent or where you have more leadership calling, maybe to primary or to, that's right.
Yeah.
Did you experience any changes that way as you were questioning?
Yeah. I think I got released as a Sunday school teacher for youth.
Yeah.
It might have been, an excuse about me having a baby. I can't remember, but he definitely got.
I was in the Elders Quorum presidency.
Yeah.
And our Elders Quorum was awesome in those days because there were a couple other guys like me in there, and we were kind of rabble-rousing, if you will. We were just bringing up the difficult parts of Scripture and being like, how do we? Yeah, they were interesting. And Elders Quorum came alive because it wasn't the stale script that we're given to read. It was interesting conversation, and people were loving it. Well, not everyone. The leaders, the bishop started attending and keeping an eye on things.
Yeah.
There was one that went over 15 minutes because the bishop was there to correct some of the worrisome ideas he was hearing.
Yeah, I wanted to be in there listening to that instead of Relief Society, though.
But I was released from the Elders Quorum presidency, and I spent a long time in primary.
Long time.
And frankly,
which is great.
At that point, that was where I wanted to be because the lessons were kind of irritating to me at that point because I was just like, oh, these are not very scriptural. And I was being super strict in that way. And, it was just more fun with the kids, And
Can I note though, because obviously Margie and I relate to this because we lost our faith in 2001, but stayed in the church for another 13 years.
Right.
Yes.
For the most part.
Right.
And so we went through a lot of this, and it's fine if there's a dog. So the one thing I want to note are the two things. Three things. One is that it's not a big deal for people to lose their Orthodox faith. Like now the term is PMO, or physically in and mentally out.
Right.
But since the church began, there's people that actually lose their Orthodox faith and stay in.
Yes.
I don't think the church actually probably even really has a huge problem with that per se.
Right.
So that's relatively normal.
Yes.
For people to lose their Orthodox faith. The second thing is it sounds like you're not going to the internet and starting a podcast or blogging. No. You're in other words, you're choosing to not make your issues public with everyone.
Absolutely.
So
we were sorry to interrupt, but we were extremely selective who we spoke to. We had many friends in the ward. We never said a nuanced thing to ever.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And the third thing is it sounds like you're wanting to stay in the church.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Which is, you show that both by not making big deals at church, but also trying to be careful about who you talk to.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I just want to say that in your defense, knowing about what's about to come.
Right.
Yeah, we were.
And it was 3 years from your faith crisis to like this
We are
moment,
3 years in at this
2017.
point.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
we are
You're 3 years into staying in the church as non-literal believers.
And honestly, just our personalities, we weren't trying to raise any questions during the lessons. There were many times that we could have raised our hand and say, well, actually, this section was changed or blah, blah, blah.
I think I did a few times.
Oh, yeah. Lindsay's a little bit more of that.
I kind of did a couple times.
But nothing major.
It was really just bringing up the scriptures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we were trying to play nice. We were just, we viewed it as our community and our people, and we were trying to make it work.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to make that clear.
Yeah.
Right. So we gave these talks that Lindsay mentioned, and the bishop corrects hers. And we get a text later that day from someone in the ward who was upset about our talks and had heard us say things that we didn't say.
Yeah.
Todd got up and said that the priesthood isn't needed. I'm like, I didn't even say the word priesthood, nor did I, So there's just a heightened.
Once you're tagged, you're tagged.
Yes.
And then they'll look for any reason to make an issue. Yeah.
And a few weeks go by, and we're hearing rumors because we've been in the ward at this point 6-7 years. We have a lot of friends in the ward. Even though we're weird, we still have a lot of, different. We still have a lot of friends. We're hearing rumors that, quote, there is a case being built against the McCormicks in the stake.
Really?
And, that was super sad to hear, and we're confused. And I contacted the stake president and I said, can we have a meeting? And he agreed. So I think we were so nervous, and we were over explaining. We went in there because we called the meeting. He didn't invite us in. So he's like, what do you want to talk about? Left it open to us.
Yeah.
And
it was weird.
So they're secretly conspiring.
That's what we were hearing.
Talking about it conspiring against you.
And so I went to the stake president to find out if that was happening. Yeah. On good. Yeah. It was good, solid information that there were people working on a case against us.
Yeah.
Which happened to us. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not fun. So what I remember about this meeting is that we went in there, and it was almost like a confessional from the sense of, all right, stake president, here's everything we've done in the past 3 years. We have talked to these people. Here's what we said. Like, we were really confident about what we had been doing.
Yeah.
Even with the most controversial, the one who left the church, we're like, listen, here's where she was before she talked to us. This was her decision. Yeah. We're still here. We told her there's really good reasons to stay. It's a great community, all of those things. Anyway, he kind of listened, and it was the first stake meeting or meeting with an LDS leader that I'd ever had where I was getting a really cold vibe from him. Normally it was like, Brother McCormick, and really warm. And it was just like, he was kind of just looking at us with a kind of a harsh stare.
For whatever reason, they perceived you as a threat.
Yeah. Yep. And it was really disconcerting because I'd never experienced that. I'd always had great relationships I'd been a leader, and suddenly we're in the hot seat and we didn't really understand why, right? Anyway, so we kind of blabbered on for a whole, kind of like, here's everything we've done. We really haven't done anything bad. Don't think that, we're a problem. And then at the end, he kind of let us do our thing. And then he said, is it true? Or no, he said, would you agree that if a member of the church stands up in Sacrament Meeting and preaches false doctrine against the church, that would be grounds for apostasy? And we knew the definition of apostasy. And I said, yes, that would be grounds for excommunication. And he kind of looked at us in a surprised way. And I said, oh, is that what you think that we did? And he's like, well, I'm hearing reports that your talks, that you went up there and you said some things against the church. And I said, well, we didn't. And I can clear this up very easily because I'll just email you the PDFs that we went up in church and read. And so we did that. And he wrote back almost immediately and said, you're fine.
Yeah.
We forgot a big part of this story, though.
That's okay. That's okay. Go back.
To add to all of this drama happening right now, our oldest turned 8 in December of 2016. Okay. And we were conflicted about baptizing him in the church. We weren't conflicted about baptizing him to Jesus. Okay. We were a little conflicted about the church. We asked the church. We didn't do it in December because our business is really seasonal and we're super busy. And we were probably stalling a little because we were just a little bit uncomfortable with the direction we were moving. So
there was a big expectation especially in his family and most Mormon families, I think, to, have a big event for the baptisms and to travel and to go to everyone's baptism and support. And it was a definite big thing in his family culture. And so we knew that was coming. This is our first kid. We knew that would be
we had traveled to New York and Arizona for the baptisms of our nieces and nephews, and they were going to come to Tennessee for our child when he got baptized. So it was a lot of pressure. We kind of punted until after the year because of the business and other things. Well, right as we're starting to have the conversations about getting the baptism set up, this threat of excommunication is looming. So here we are in this crossfire of, are we going to be excommunicated or are we going to be baptizing our 8-year-old? What is going to happen here? And we kind of, after the meeting with the stake president, we could kind of more seriously start talking about the baptism. And I met with our bishop, who is a guy that I had known very well, who I had done business with. He helped us get our business off the ground. And, lent us money and paid him back and, the whole thing. So I had a meeting with him. It was, in order to give your child the Holy Ghost, you have to be a temple worthy member. And I didn't have a temple recommend. I hadn't renewed it. So he said, are you planning on giving the Holy Ghost? And I said, yes. He's like, well, you're going to have to come in for an interview. And you don't have to get a temple recommend, but I have to ask you the questions. Because I told him I didn't want to recommend. Anyway, we spent 3+ hours together.
I'm like, where is he?
Right.
Because I was having the hardest time answering the questions because I was very, very nuanced and I didn't want to be dishonest.
Yeah.
And so I see John and Margie looking at each other. They've lived a lot of this, I think.
When Winston turned 8, I was in the exact same position.
Oh, wow.
And I was doing Mormon stories. So the stake president made me meet with him weekly for a year.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
Before he let me baptize Winston.
Oh, wow.
So it was like, you're saying 3 hours?
Like, this is a year.
Like,
try a year of
Every week for a year.
meetings. But eventually he let me.
Did you get to? Oh, okay.
Okay.
When Winston was 9.
And
That's right.
so
Did you have to give
So
him the
Winston, but it was late.
wow.
you have to give them the discussions at that point if they turn that?
Yeah, I didn't know you have to have the missionary.
Maybe they.
discussions.
I mean, what do you mean?
Like as a
I
9-year-old.
think it's a church rule if they don't get
Yeah.
baptized when they're 8 years old.
Oh, no.
Okay.
Yeah. But I had to earn it.
Yeah.
You really
Oh,
did.
wow.
You had to
And
work
Winston
for
had to
it.
wait a year.
Wow.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's
Because I
wild.
did not believe literally,
Yeah.
but I thought Jesus was a good role model.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
the church has good in it.
Yeah.
But did I believe it was the one true church? No.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Oh, I had, we did all this work on those questions to figure out how I could answer them honestly and authentically.
Yeah.
And still be able to pass the interview, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I didn't say a single lie to my stake president. And, I said I sustained him in his role to be a prophet.
Yeah, exactly.
You know how to lawyer
They're a prophet of the church.
Yeah.
He's the leader of the church, so he has authority over the
He could become a
church.
prophet.
And he knew enough about me that I disagreed with doctrines and things of the church. And there's that question.
Yeah.
In 2017. I think it's changed a little bit.
Yeah.
I can't remember how it was worded, but basically if you disagree with the church, that's a problem. And he's like, well, I know this one's going to be hard. We talked about that one for 2 hours, that question. And then he got to the end of the interview. He's like, I don't know what to do with you. And I don't feel comfortable signing off yet. So I'm going to talk. We walked down to the stake president's office. He wasn't there or available. So he's like, I'm going to have to talk to the president. Call you back. So he called me the next morning and said, we would feel more, he tried to do it with the most love he could, but we would feel more comfortable if you don't do the Holy Ghost, if you have someone else so my dad, but that was what started outing me to my family.
Yeah.
They had no idea. My parents are in Utah. I'm out here in Tennessee doing my thing and starting to really change. and they're not really seeing the changes because they're far away.
And for Never Mormons, just a weird thing. You could be a 16-year-old boy and baptize people because priests can baptize people and they only need the lower or the Aaronic priesthood to do it. But the gift of the Holy Ghost, for whatever reason, you need to be an elder, which means you have to have the higher priesthood, the Melchizedek priesthood. So they were assessing your temple worthiness because temple worthiness is a proxy for worthiness to exercise the Melchizedek priesthood.
Exactly.
But you were less worthy, but worthy enough for priest level Aaronic priesthood stuff, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
So,
which is weird.
Yeah,
Like,
it was
legalistic. Mumbo
silly.
jumbo.
Right. Just a waste of time.
I mean, all of these
Like, what's more
events,
sacred, the baptism or the gift of the
I know.
Lord?
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah. But all of it, I think it was a week before my recommend interview that I was in the stake president's office about to get potentially disciplinary counsel.
Yeah.
And then we're trying to organize a baptism. We had the baptism on the calendar because my family had tickets to fly in. And I was suddenly in the crosshairs of our
Didn't
stake.
he say, right when we went in there, that they've set a date? Was that the first time?
No, that was
Sorry,
not this time.
Okay.
So the baptism, we asked if we could baptize them in the river because we felt a lot more comfortable with that. And they didn't let us do that. So we did it. We did the baptism. The morning of the baptism, I woke up almost as sick as I've ever been.
And it was nerves.
We didn't know that.
It wasn't like food poisoning.
I don't, psychology, and I don't think I fully understood.
He was
I was just like, bad
white
luck.
as a ghost.
But 15, I remember I was in my bed and it was 15 minutes before we needed to leave. And Lindsay walked in and said, "Are you going to be able to do this?" I'm like, "I'm going to do it."
Were you throwing up?
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah. That's a stress.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if the pictures of me at the baptism, I am frail and white as a ghost.
As your white suit.
Yes.
That you were wearing.
I looked very holy. But no, I was, it was, looking back on it, I was so conflicted, and the stress of all that we had just been through. And I can't remember if it was as we were walking out to go to the baptism or on the way back, my mom sat me down. And
it was on the way there.
I think it was on the way there, and said, "Honey, what's going on with you and the Holy Ghost?"
Because I had cheating on your wife.
Right.
Are you looking at porn?
Yeah, because I had to call my dad on Friday.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I found out. I found out on the Friday before the day before the baptism that I couldn't do the Holy Ghost. So I called my dad and said, "Dad, would you?" So this is the right last second. So they knew something was up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for the Never Mormons, like there are these rite of passage rituals, like getting married in the temple, or blessing your baby as a man, or giving the priesthood to your kids as a man or father when your sons advance to the right age, or baptism, where if you don't perform the ordinance, everyone knows there's something off.
Right.
So I'm not saying it's intended this way, but it ends up being a matter of intense public shame.
Absolutely.
Right.
If you don't baptize your son, but everyone sees your son get baptized by somebody else, it's immediately adultery or porn or something.
Mm-hmm.
But then, you don't want to, so you don't want that shame. And you also, for me, I didn't want the shame of someone else baptizing my kid, because then you're like,
that was your thing.
F you, like I'm as worthy as any of these people.
Right.
I'm not going to be emasculated by having someone else baptize my son. So there's the public image, but then there's the pride, and then there's the integrity. You don't want to lie and fake stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
And you value the church.
Yes.
But you don't want to leave so you don't want to leave it, but you don't want to lie. And so it's a lot. And nobody who's not in a high demand religion gets all this complexity.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, even in 2017, I don't think the thought had seriously crossed our mind that we would ever leave the church.
It wasn't even in your radar.
Yeah.
We can make this work. There was a seed kind of sowing really deep inside us, which was a concern for our children.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to be the outcast. And we were, you don't want to put them into a culture where we're odd and we're not really encouraging them to do the temple stuff or the mission.
Because we already knew we weren't going to encourage them for that.
I was even nervous about young men because I know when I got into young men, it's a whole other level, right? I mean, it was temple and missions and prophet and priesthood every single
That's
lesson.
when the real brainwashing begins, is youth and the young men's and young women's.
Right. So that was the seed that was kind of sowing. Like the baptism was one thing, but it's like when he turns 12, are we really going to be able to?
He's a December birthday, and that year was the year that they changed the policy to like, they could get the priesthood a whole year earlier, like the year that they turned 12. Yeah. And so really that would make him just a couple weeks after he turned 11 that he would be able, or, to get the priesthood. So like kind of pushed us a year earlier.
As we started facing the inevitability that he was going to turn 12 and he was going to be taken and he was going to go into young men's, we were starting to have the conversations. Are we going to have to, is that when we're going to have to bail?
Yeah.
And that's complex. Also, let's put the Hinckley lens on it. Mm-hmm. You're all aunts and uncles, grandparents, both sides, or all into the church, seeing each other regularly. Yep. You don't want to be you've got these kids who are hanging around their cousins and their aunts and uncles and grandparents all the time. You don't want them to be the first ones not baptized, the first ones not confirmed, the first ones not to get the priesthood. So they're like, because that's just, it's not like you're living in isolation. It's Mormonville.
Oh, yeah.
Even in Knoxville.
Yes.
It's Mormonville. And at the same time, you don't want to lie to your kids and make them Orthodox Mormons where they're going to either stop trusting you as parents because they know you don't believe,
right?
But you also don't want to put them in the pathway towards brainwashing. Right. So there's this time limit of how long you can pull this off before it all unravels one way or another.
Right. There just is.
And, and when they made the announcement Lindsay's talking about, our time limit moved up a year. Mm-hmm. Because suddenly we thought we had till he turned 12, and now he's going to have to go in almost an entire year earlier. So we lost a year of decision.
And grandparents and aunts and uncles are like, when are you going to baptize so-and-so?
Right, yeah, because Luke was coming up.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was only 2 years.
This is important. It seems technical and legalistic, but this is core, faith crisis problems.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And heart-wrenching because you're equal parts, like you love Mormonism and you love your family and you love the culture and you don't want to leave it.
Yeah.
And you know what happens when you leave. Mm-hmm. And you know what it's going to do to every relationship you have. So I know at the time we said we wanted to stay to be a support for other people, a lot of nuanced members do. And most are sincere. I think I was sincere, but I also think I was putting off the inevitable that, because
we also hadn't seen any, like, this is a long time ago. It's not like now. We had not really seen anyone leave the church. We were warned of people that left the church and then their marriages fell apart or they started swinging or whatever it was. And we just, we looked around and we couldn't even see like an example of just a nice little cute family that stayed together, and still did nice, cute things. We just couldn't even see it. Totally different than today.
Yeah.
So that was hard. That was scary.
Yeah, 2015,
I don't know if we
and you were
that.
super early.
Oh,
obviously.
Way. Yeah, I'm sure.
But it was very scary. It's like, who are we going to even have anymore?
Oh, yeah. Like, where will you go?
They were literally saying that at that time. Where will you go? What will you
lose your parents, lose your siblings, lose your, even lose your children. Like the stakes are huge.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So
they feel huge.
Yeah. Yeah. So 2017, another thing of note, we get through the baptism, kind of move on with life. And my mom now knows that we're nuanced. And so she's concerned, and Lindsay's starting to feel it from her side of the family too. People know that we're different, and we're getting articles and things sent to us. We go to Utah in
the project. The project.
Yeah. So it was my 20-year high school reunion, Lancers in Layton. We go to Utah for that in the summer of 2017. And we were starting to get a little bolder. We were, it took 3 years.
Bolder with being authentic.
Bolder, just like we had been hiding so much.
Yes.
Which is not good for your mental health.
And this
really
is
bad for Lindsay.
Really bad for me because I don't think I've ever experienced anxiety in my life until this period of time. Yeah. And it started y'all probably, it just started being this feeling right here. I could just feel it in my chest. And then it actually moved up to my throat for a long time. I would just say it like my throat. There was one day, about that I was feeling it pretty hard, and I can't remember what the circumstance was, but I just told Todd, I'm like, I gotta go. And I just kind of like walked out the door and just kind of took off running around the neighborhood. And I just, I was just so jittery, and he was kind of freaked out. Oh, yeah. He's like, she doesn't go running. And so he was Googling things, and then found something about not being authentic can give you anxiety like that. Or
1,000%.
Yeah. Is that the word that is?
Yeah, it can be deadly. It can actually be deadly, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I don't know if Nathan talked about it on his, but it sent him to the hospital twice.
Yeah. Emergency room.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. With panic attacks, thinking you were dying.
Right.
Yeah. That's what sustained secrets or inauthenticity could do to your mental health, let alone autoimmune disorders and all depression and all sorts of, it's lots of things, but
yeah, it had a huge
effect. So, I was hiding that I wasn't wearing garment. I was trying to hide that. And so I would, things like that. So that's where the reunion comes into play. And so,
like privately, Lindsay she was wearing non-garment clothes. For a long time, she didn't wear them, but she still wore the sleeves and the long shorts. But when we were just by ourselves, she would wear just shorter shorts and show her shoulders. But anytime we'd go to her parents' house, it was back on with the garment type clothing to respect their house, But coming into the reunion, I think we both were starting to get tired of being inauthentic and hiding.
So I was
leading
just
a double life almost. We're pretending we look Mormon still.
It's unsustainable.
Yeah. Yes, it is. So I was just like, what would I just wear to this? If I were to go pick a dress, what would I choose? And so we just did. We went and picked one that I just really liked. And
which showed your shoulders.
And it was honestly for people-pleasing Todd, who, who was on this pedestal. I was like the golden child and all of this. This was, it may sound stupid again to people who don't really understand the programming and the way that Mormons think and are raised. I was like, okay, I'm sticking my neck out because I'm going to my reunion that I planned.
Oh, he was the student class president, right?
The senior class president.
Sorry.
And we are going to out ourselves.
With the wife showing porn shoulders.
Yes, exactly.
Which is so silly.
Which is so silly.
The type of dress is going to make such a statement.
Yes. Right? Yeah.
But we said, when it was, and I also knew it was going to, because we were staying at my parents' home, and that was going to be horrifying for them, which was sad.
Yeah.
And
it's not
it's like a coming out.
Yes.
It is.
It was definitely the first time that you wore non-garment clothes in a very public place.
Well, and not only that, I picked that dress out because we had planned family pictures in Utah up in that beautiful canyon. I can't think of the name.
Albion Basin. And
I had a friend photographer out there. And so we took family pictures in the same dress. So
and she wasn't wearing garment clothes. They were going to be on our wall. This was,
that's a big deal.
We're starting to own it.
Yeah.
But because she dressed like she did at my reunion, several people reached out to me that were early on.
He's like, what are they going to say?
And that was part of the reason we did it. Because again, it was...
had their own doubts and questions.
That we're having...
Because that's a tell to other questioning or non-Mormons.
And that wasn't really the reason. I mean, it was like, let's be authentic. And
it pushed me over the edge because I was, having been through the 3 years we'd just been through largely alone and knowing how hard it was, I was like, you know what, let's do it because it's going to fish out people who might be in a similar situation.
Yeah.
And there was a good friend of mine from high school who didn't even come to the reunion, but saw the pictures. And she DM'd me and at first she was really Mormon-y online. Like I'd been seeing General Conference Posts, all the things. Her first message, I thought she was judging me. I thought that she was coming to save us because Lindsay wasn't wearing her garments. But she's like, a week ago, my husband told me he lost his faith. And my world is upside down right now. And anyway, we were able to really help her. And we got on a group chat with her. And I went and visited her in Arizona. I was going out there anyway. My sister lives there. So anyway, it's amazing how just a little Easter egg like that can help people who are going through similar things.
And that's just naturally how I wanted to dress.
Yes.
I can't even, I have a hard time wearing sleeves now after having worn the garments for so long. It bothers me. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
that's big. I'm glad you mentioned that. That's big stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just going to say as a side, for most of the women I have met where we have talked about garments, authenticity, they all remember the first time they go out in a public way where they will be seen by people who are important to them.
Yeah.
And that moment where they choose authenticity over this idea of like fitting in.
Right.
And kind of staying invisible and safe.
Yes.
And I just think it's interesting because they all remember it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And me included. Yeah.
Yeah. There was one time when I literally called or texted my family member who we were about to go meet up with for like a July hot baseball game.
Humid, super hot.
Yeah. And I'm like, I felt like I needed to give them a heads up that I'm going to be wearing a tank top. I actually still wore the pants down to here, but I felt like I needed to tell them that I was going to be wearing a tank top.
Warn them.
Yeah. Which is so silly. If thinking about it now, it just feel like I did a lot of that. I took on other people's feelings so much and like felt like I needed to soften it and apologize for it and make it okay. You know, anytime someone came at me, and they came at me a lot, Nathan included, he came at us pretty hard trying to save us. But yeah, I had a lot of respect for my family and for my brothers, especially. I always really looked up to them. Really did not want to disappoint anybody in my family. And all I was doing was disappointing every single one of them. And they were letting me know.
And you know what's mind-blowing is this has been the plight of Mormons and Mormon women for 100, 150 years. And just this year, 2025, the Mormon Church comes out with sleeveless garments.
Which pisses me off. Bullshit.
Because just now they come out with sleeveless garments where you could wear that exact top you're wearing with garments underneath. Yeah. So Mormon women, and so I mean, on the one hand, yay, this doesn't have to be something Mormon women. Why are you wearing them?
Is God really doing that?
Yeah, why did God have it wrong for 150 years, right?
Yeah.
And why did so many people have to go through this torture?
Well, it makes us very upset as those of us that had to wear them and could not wear tank tops. Yeah. And, it's upsetting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yay, church, for the progress.
Sure,
but.
Yeah. Whatever. I mean, a couple inches of fabric. Okay.
Yeah. Anyway. Okay.
Okay. So, we mentioned a friend who left with her husband. She's the one that worked for us and that we'd been with a long time. When they left, they were very vocal, or the husband was particularly. Yeah. And it caused a rift in our life. The fact that they were vocal and that we were closely tied to them, that put us at odds with pretty much everyone in our life.
Yeah.
Our family, because they went to social and they said some really hurtful things to active members.
That we would have never said.
That we would never. Yeah, we wouldn't have done that. It's just that was their style, but it was projected onto us. And again, we were blamed for what they were going through. So that's when we really started. We were still attending. We were trying our hardest to hang on, frankly.
It's not fun to stay attending Mormon church when you don't believe anymore. It's torture.
And
when people aren't liking you.
Yes.
There.
Yeah, and they think you're a threat.
And telling you.
Oh yeah, we know.
And telling you that why are you here?
So it's a real testament to how much you love the church or want to make it work.
Yeah.
That you can not just continue attending, but for years.
Yeah.
Well, and we had to go. It was pretty traumatic to go. We had to go every other week.
Yeah.
We had to go. We had to do a week in the mountains.
Church. Yeah.
That's just health management.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. Something similar. Okay.
I mean,
so it's a natural reaction to needing a break.
We had to go and face, on the stand, and we haven't told this part of the story yet. So I guess we got to tell this part of the story. So the person that worked for us that was in the bishopric that we let go, I just hate even telling this part of the story. It's so sad, but
we found out that he started a competing business with Photo Barn with my cousin. This is a long time ago. We're fine now. I'm just telling the story how we were then. Anyway, we found out he's, this guy that had signed a non-compete, we had given severance to, and my cousin completely copied everything that we were doing. Started a business, completely competing in the same areas as us. Super upsetting.
Like literally
upsetting.
printing photos on wood?
Printing photos on wood. Yes.
Holy that's
and not very many people were doing this, right?
And unethical, right?
There was actually 2 or 3 other Mormons that did the same thing. Believe it or not.
In the early days that were loosely affiliated.
Yeah, Etsy or something. But
this was a major betrayal.
Because he had a lot of contacts still with, and knowledge from us. And he had a non-compete agreement that he had signed. And the non-compete agreement, he had to sign again to get the severance money, because we kind of made sure, hey, we're letting you go, but here you go, just sign this that you signed,
as a condition of the severance.
Yeah.
So he would honor his non-compete agreement.
Was it a year or 2 years or something? Anyway, it was well within that agreement, and so we were pissed.
Yeah.
We called my cousin first. He didn't really see a problem with it, and so there was nothing else we could do with him. But we kind of let him know, he has a non-compete. He's not supposed to be doing this. Oh, it's not he kind of just washed his hands of it. So we contacted him, and nothing at all.
Yeah. We searched for that non-compete, and it had been removed from our files.
Yeah. All the others were there.
He was in charge of the files.
Yeah.
So before he left, he removed it. So we couldn't do anything legally about it.
I'll just say you suspect, just
sure. It was not
cover your tracks legally.
Yeah, we don't know.
We don't know.
It wasn't there.
Yeah. It was not there. It was not there. That's a better way to put it, John.
Not to doubt you, just because I've been through some legal stuff.
No, that's wise.
No, I think that's wise. And yes, there were witnesses, but it's hearsay, right?
Yeah.
So that was heartbreaking. And we tried, he was in our bishopric. And in the ward we're attending. Mm-hmm. And we have to face him weekly. Look at him on the stand.
And we never spoke to him again.
And we asked, the bishop came to our home after this happened, because I reached out, because the bishopric member who had worked for us would not respond and would not speak to us.
We wanted to talk about it openly.
And the bishop came to our home, and we talked about it openly. And we said, we would like to reconcile.
Get in a room with us.
We would and he's a lawyer. Our bishop was a lawyer. So I'm like, could you mediate a conversation at least? Anyway, he just told us to forgive and
give us some scripture.
Gave us some scriptures, and
forgive and forget and move on.
But it obviously made church extremely painful and awkward for us. And the abuses just kind of went on. They were trying to patent things that we had invented. And they, it was a horrific few years, painful, very painful.
And, they're active, faithful Mormons, and we're these fringy Mormons, right?
Yeah. So, we were easy prey because we already had been discounted. At this point, I had been demoted from the primary to, this is a good one. This is a good calling.
Great calling. Oh my gosh.
The ward technology specialist.
But there's 3 wards, and each ward had a ward technology specialist. So every 3 years, I might have to set up the projector once or twice. For state conference. That was his job.
So that was my job.
I don't think he ever did it.
No, I did once. I actually got to do my calling one time. So, and while I was still in the primary, it was just church was just getting very painful. The primary president pulled me. She was doing kind of like PPI. I guess I wouldn't call it PPI, but check-ins with the teachers to see how they were doing. In my interview, she said to me, "Well, how are you doing? I mean, how does it feel that nobody loves this bishopric member, but really doesn't like you guys?" And I'm just like, it feels great. Thanks for asking.
Yeah.
Bye. So it was, and not that the majority of our ward honestly was super sweet to us.
I have dear friends that are still in the ward today and have never blinked an eye. So,
including stake president members, the mother of our previous stake president passed away, and Lindsay touched up her photo, and we had a woman have a late term miscarriage, and they had a funeral, and I sang at it. We were we were really trying with everything we had to be a part of this community and supporting them. And, you know, at the same time, there were many who would have preferred me not be around.
Yeah.
You know?
It just felt heavy.
All right. Sorry. That was painful.
Yeah.
So 2019 rolls around. We're kind of taking it on a lot of fronts. Things are difficult in the ward. We're starting to lose some friends. One example of a friendship issue, we had befriended some of the people that were our age from a few other wards that weren't loving their ward and needing friends. And so we invited them over to our house for a game night. We started connecting with them. We go to dinner with them sometimes. And then we started playing volleyball regularly. And it was super fun. Fun people. Never once said anything about our diverging views or anything to do with where we stood with the church. Just we're hanging out with these guys, right? Lo and behold, while we're playing volleyball twice a week now, we're like really enjoying it. Suddenly the ward takes an interest in having a ward volleyball team.
Guess who had that up?
And the bishopric member who started the competing business starts this volleyball club essentially in the ward and invites
everyone but us.
All of our friends. Never heard of a bishop, a rogue bishopric member starting a volleyball team.
It was like a rec. They were doing a rec league. They were going around, but they invited everybody but us to be on the volleyball.
That was abusive. That's full on abusive.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm sure, you know, empathetically, I mean, I know what he's trying to do. He's worried about his flock.
Yeah.
He's worried we're going to pull them down like in his mind we did with some of the others who they thought we were influencing. And so how do we squash it? We'll pull them into our volleyball league and kill this thing that's giving regular. I mean, I get where he's coming from, but it just showed how much the stake misunderstood us.
Yeah. And didn't come to us and talk to us.
Yeah.
Like they were never wanting to hear from us.
But I'll also say he had a guilty conscience for what he did with you business-wise
100%.
and didn't want to have to see your face every Sunday, reminding him that he had done some really unethical things. I'm speculating, but that's my psychologist brain,
well,
you know?
That's,
He wanted you out of there,
right?
So you wouldn't remind him of his behaviors. I believe.
I think there's some evidence for that coming up because 2019 rolls around. Okay, we're at the end of our rope a little bit. It's just getting too hard. You know, we've now been doing this for 4 years. 4 years. Not nearly as long. I don't know how y'all did it.
I don't know.
I mean, kudos to you.
Yeah.
You're our story, but times like 5, 5 amounts of time. Anyway.
No, but that's a lot. 5 years is a lot.
Yeah.
It was a lot.
Most people don't last a year.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Our second is getting close to baptism.
Oops.
Yeah.
And our oldest is getting close to priesthood. And we're feeling more and more out of place and unwanted, right? And so in January, we're just like, should we not go this week? And we just kind of kept saying that for a few weeks and just stopped going.
Well, 1 week, I think it was canceled. For like weather or something. And so.
Yeah.
So then
we stopped it. We really we didn't make a decision to stop attending. We just stopped.
That kind of cancellation kind of helped us. Like we didn't go that week. Right. And so it kind of set the pace, I guess. Yeah. And then we didn't go back.
We didn't go back. No, to our surprise on Easter Sunday of 2019, I get like
3 months later.
3 months later. We hadn't been there for 3 months. I get a text from the executive secretary of the stake who says the stake president wants to meet with us
during our Easter picnic.
Yeah, literally at our home. We have our entire extended family there just celebrating Easter. And I was so confused. And, this is a longtime family friend of Lindsay's. They were in her ward when she was younger.
Yeah.
Who sent us this text. They used to babysit our kid that was of baptism age now. They helped us when Lindsay was doing weddings.
She was my young women's leader.
Sweet people.
Love
Sweet.
Her. Yes.
And that's what I have to say about even the people who were doing harm to us are otherwise really sweet and good people.
Yes.
Totally.
And are scared and are driven by fear.
Right.
We say sometimes it takes religion to get good people to do bad things.
Right.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think too, when this idea of being othered, it's like the minute you're a perceived threat, it immediately just makes that fear kicks in. It makes it so much easier when people view you as you're not like me. You're not like us anymore.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I sent a joke back to him, just trying to keep it a little light. And I said, "Oh, is he giving me a calling?" And he said,
Stake High Council.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And he said, I don't really know they don't tell me what the meetings are about.
Like, okay, I'm sure.
So we really went into it very confused why they would be calling us in, because we hadn't talked really to anyone in the ward for months. We hadn't been there in months. We are really curious what we would be doing in the stake with the stake president. And we go in. It's the same stake president that we had dealt with one other time. And he said, we have been getting some spontaneous letters from members of the stake.
Just letters coming in to the stake all at the same time. Sorry.
And no, I love your commentary. Please keep it real over here.
Yeah.
I'm too diplomatic. I'll give the details. You get the feeling.
All right.
We've been getting some letters, and when we receive these letters, we have to do something about it.
Yeah.
And so we're going to need to set a disciplinary council. And we're just like, I mean, almost not even a hello, how are you? It's just like,
what are you talking about?
And so he says this. I'm like, whoa, can you just back up a minute here?
Which, for those who don't know, it's an excommunication trial.
Right.
You're on trial for excommunication.
Right.
Which is the most shaming, damning thing a Mormon can go through.
Yes.
And how many of those, once they're called, how many of those don't end in excommunication?
Pretty much they all end in
They've made their decision. That's
for apostasy. If it's for apostasy,
right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which we should talk for a minute just to explain to the audience what excommunication means. It's not just, oh, you can't come to church here anymore. Oh, you're not a member. Like do you want to take a minute and explain just kind of what's at stake for you and your family?
Well, I mean, I know one thing is that your temple, anything that you did in the temple, which we were sealed in the temple for eternity. Our kids are sealed to us because they were born into our marriage when we were sealed in the temple. So we won't be with each other. We won't be with our kids in eternity.
And you won't be with your parents or your siblings in heaven. So it's cutting you off from your believing parents
which
and believing
would be devastating
siblings.
to both of our parents if they had a child that was excommunicated.
It's the worst thing.
Oh yeah,
for a Mormon parent to believe their kid
for sure
won't be with them in heaven. That's the whole part of the plan of salvation.
Absolutely.
Right.
And if the person who's doing it to you believes what they're doing to you, it's the most violent thing you can do to another person, really.
Cut them off from all of their loved ones forever.
Right.
Yeah. And consign them to Mormon hell, basically.
Right. So my first question is, well, are we able to see these letters? Can we please see the letters?
Yeah, of course. Like, what are you talking about letters?
Yeah. Because we're so confused. Like, who would be right? Like, do we even get to see the letters before we have a court?
They weren't going to show them to us. They were just going to set a court.
Right. And so, and we asked how many. He said, like 6, 7, or 8 or something, 7 or 8.
Yeah.
And we're like, okay.
Now, is this when we're like, so people were just sending in letters?
Well, then we start questioning that.
Like, what do you mean? Like,
that the spontaneous letters.
Did you ask for letters?
We
kind of started asking questions like, did you ask people to write letters? Oh, no. We don't do that. We do not do that. That's against our policy. That's not how this works. That is not part of how the church works. They do not build a case. No.
And we pressed them on that. We're like, you're telling us.
You're telling me.
7 random individuals decided right now to write letters in about
3 months
our family that hasn't been to church for 3 months.
So we were just sitting there for a long time.
We just received the letters and we have to deal with it. That was kind of the answers we were getting.
Made my blood boil.
So, I mean, he did, to his credit, I guess he didn't have to let us do that, but he did. We set up another meeting in a week and we asked for our bishop to be there too. Because the bishop was a lawyer and the bishop thought and is a guy I've known for a long time. And he thought very logically, and I knew I was going to build a case for why they shouldn't excommunicate us. And I was worried the stake president wouldn't fully grasp the case I was trying to build, And
he would just
so I said, can our bishop be there? He said, yes, the bishop can be there. So a week later, we go back in and they present 7 letters to us in a folder. And they ask us to read them.
Oh, but we can't take a picture of them, or we can't read them out loud even, I think.
Yeah, we had to read them silently.
Were the names redacted?
No. The names were there.
But there were missing letters from what he had said before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there were less letters than originally. So we're thinking some people backed out when they heard we're going to read them.
And we actually... Yeah.
We know, we were able to confirm that. We still have way too many friends in the church to not know what's going on sometimes. So we sit down and we read these letters, and I hope my memory is good. You might have notes of it. Okay. So surprise, surprise. One letter is from the bishopric member who we had let go, who started the competing business. Letter number 1 is him. Letter number 2 is his wife. Surprise, surprise.
So no sour grapes there.
No, not at
all.
Now,
the content of those letters is the Easter egg we gave you earlier. So our big sin that justifies these letters and our excommunication,
your eternal damnation,
are being ripped apart from our family forever, is our discussion in 2014. It's now 2019.
5 years ago.
5 years ago.
Yeah.
In 2014 about the mall.
The mall. The City Creek Mall.
Saying you weren't crazy about the
Upsetting
mall.
That they brought that up in a conversation.
That is our excommunicable offense, was that discussion in a home about the mall.
Which is not even doctrine.
Right.
Right. No,
Yeah, how can that be apostasy or whatever they were trying to get? Yeah.
That makes no sense.
Silly.
So
silly. We were like,
I know.
What in the world?
We're just kind of shaking our heads and trying. I was literally trying not to laugh because I'm just like, this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever
It's like you're saying same-sex marriage is good. You're
right.
You know?
Right. It's just like, I don't know about this mall thing.
Yeah.
So his letter said that, and then her letter said the same thing, right?
Well, no.
Well, she had 2, didn't she?
Yeah. So then we had the best friend of the bishopric member who was also at that meeting. He also spontaneously.
Yes. This is miraculous
in 2019.
right here.
Decided to write a letter
because he lives now across in another
He lives in
state.
Texas now and has for about 3 or 4 years.
But isn't that a miracle that he decided to send a letter at the same time? I mean, it must be from God.
That's a prompting for you.
Spirit.
I'm like,
Spirit.
we were like, so he's, I mean, we just kept pushing that with
They're not
like,
building a
president,
case.
Like, so
No,
you
no
didn't
case is being
ask
built
him,
here.
you know, he was his best friend. And did he ask him to, oh, no.
So yeah, his letter was about this horrible thing we
The
did,
mall.
talking about the mall. And then there was another letter, oddly, from the wife of the bishopric member. So she wrote 2 of the 6 letters. She's 33% of the letters came from, and if you add them, half of the letters came from this one family. In the end. So her letter, her second letter was, do you remember?
It was something about, so she taught another girl who ended up leaving the church, I think that month or months before. She taught her, and at their visit teaching appointments, they were gossiping about me, I guess. And yeah, basically she was kind of, I can't remember what she was saying, but something about.
I remember.
You do?
This is funny.
Oh, God.
So Lindsay, because she's a great social butterfly party host, we do this really fun Halloween party every year. And it's mostly been with ward members because that's been our community. And even after we left the church, all those ward members still come to our Halloween party. It's fun. It's a tradition. We raised our kids together, trick-or-treated, all the stuff. Well, at the most recent one, so it must have been 2018 Halloween, Lindsay and this other woman were joking probably about how tired they were and how Halloween is a pain. And Lindsay joked about needing a glass of wine. And then this friend just innocently, because she's friends with Lindsay, she mentioned that Lindsay was joking about wine to her visiting teaching.
They were yapping.
So that's what the letter was about. That Lindsay joked about wine in a private conversation.
And I know active faithful Mormons that drink wine.
Oh, wow.
I even know of one former area authority who drank wine as an area authority. Now he didn't publicize that, but but like, drinking wine is not grounds for excommunication. It's probably not even grounds for church discipline.
Maybe joking about it is, though.
Joking about it at Halloween.
The Doctrine and Covenants 89 allows it.
Right.
Absolutely.
So you can lose your temple recommend over it now,
right?
But it's not grounds for a disciplinary council.
Well,
certainly not joking about it.
Right.
Yeah.
Side note, growing up, I would work at the steak vineyard. Did you guys have vineyards ever in any of your steaks?
No, we had peanut butter canning.
Okay.
Yeah, I was in Houston.
Yeah, I mean, Utah used to grow and produce wine and other,
Brigham had all kinds of,
distilleries, and Brigham put the...
Well, Joseph died having drank wine the night. Joseph Smith died having drank wine with his colleagues the night before he was murdered.
Absolutely.
And all the way up until...
And Jesus, by the way, Jesus drank a lot of wine.
Oh, yeah. And shared it and created it.
First miracles.
Created
the best stuff. 900 bottles or something.
Yeah. At the wedding,
he knows how to party.
Oh, yes.
I know. I like
the Jesus of the New Testament is just an awesome guy.
Cool.
I really like that Jesus.
We're totally all about
So anyway, what a ridiculous.
ridiculous.
Silly accusation.
So that's 1, 2, 3.
But so the wife writes that letter. Okay, now get this. I just can't believe it keeps getting more ridiculous because the exact same word for word letter is presented again, this time in a different font, size, and font.
With her best friend's name at the bottom of it.
It's the same letter.
The word for word.
Word for word. And we were telling them that. We're like, this is the same. Oh, no.
Yeah, they're like, no, it's not the same. They're like, look at it.
Oh my gosh.
It's the same letter.
It's the same letter.
But they changed the font and had someone else sign it.
Else. Yeah.
I mean, one thing that comes up a little bit is the first time around with the threat of excommunication, it's clear they didn't even check your talks. Right. It was just like, we heard about it, and then you present the talks and they're like, oh, with a threat of like, honestly, the most violent thing you can do to a person. And now this time, they didn't notice a letter. Did they, you know what I mean?
Right.
It's just, it's insulting.
Yeah.
When there's so much at stake
so
for you.
about it. Yeah.
And what we hadn't mentioned is social, it's basically social homicide.
Right.
Because when you excommunicate somebody, they lose all their friends. Mm-hmm. They lose the love and respect of their grandparents, their parents, their siblings, their nieces, their nephews. And they lose everything. It's like a social death penalty for the rest of your life.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's very serious.
Well, and our kids still had friends in the ward.
Yeah.
And like that, your parents got excommunicated. How would that feel? I had people saying, well, why do you care if you get excommunicated? Of course I care if I get wrongly excommunicated from all of the church I want.
Probably would be something else, right? It's like, okay, well, I messed up according to their rules, but to be excommunicated.
Yeah.
No, to a Mormon, excommunication is worse than an adulterer. It's worse than a murderer. Yeah. Even child molesters in the Mormon church often don't get excommunicated.
Yeah. Are you serious?
Oh my gosh, all the
they
time.
Take very seriously, right?
All the time, the Mormon church forgives child molesters and doesn't excommunicate them. Excommunication is worse than beating your spouse, committing adultery, and molesting a child, for sure.
That's gross.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
So it's way serious.
So I mean, I don't know. Are these just like rogue Tennessee backwoods? What are they doing?
They're not backwoods.
They're not though, but they're not. Yeah, they're transplants. Yeah.
Yeah, they're professionals. Mm-hmm. Many of them come from Western families. Yeah. They are. We call our area for the Knoxville area. It's kind of like little Utah over there because it's flat. It's one of the Tennessee's very hilly. Our area is kind of flat. It's by the lake. It's affluent. It's there's lots of job opportunities. It's very, very nice. White collar.
Yeah.
And so it attracts a lot of people. And I grew up in Utah, so I have a certain thing I like, and the hills of Tennessee and the trees made me a little claustrophobic. Whereas where we live out here, I can see a little bit. I can't see any mountains. We don't have huge mountains like Utah, but so it attracts a lot of Western, Western members. So
just
it's not
the difference
backwoodsy.
Between like my parents' ward and our ward is what we're talking about. And I will say, I don't think anyone in my parents' ward would have ever done this, though.
I don't think so either.
So I mean,
they were being hardcore here.
It was.
Yes.
Well, or is it, with this guy?
Well, I'm just meaning the roulette from leadership. That's right. From ward to ward.
Gotcha. Right. Yep.
Okay. So there's one more letter. This letter was really sad for us to read because we told you briefly about a girl that moved into the ward and she had reading planted. She was having her own faith kind of journey crisis, and we gave her a lot of support, and we told her to stay in the church. And
we were like saying, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater type stuff, because we were still in it. We weren't.
We were definitely in a headspace at that time where we saw more value in staying than leaving.
Obviously. Yeah.
And so we were absolutely advocating that she, we weren't pushing anything under the rug. We were helping her think through it logically and thoroughly, like you do on your podcast. I feel like, you're not just going to hide stuff. That's not healthy. So anyway, we were really trying to help this girl, right?
Well, and throughout that time, it got hairy with her and it got bad. And anyway, long story short, she ended up like coming back to me and apologizing for her behavior and just being like felt very bad because it was just
that first excommunication attempt was largely a result of her and her family being nervous about us.
Right. So she realized that it was, oh, you didn't say that, I was wrong, and things like that. And so
she begged for forgiveness.
Oh yeah, brought me gifts
for like 6 months,
and that was sweet. And then I was just like, okay, yeah, I mean, we're fine, we're good, and I felt good about it. And so here we are seeing a letter from 2 years later.
Yeah.
We're seeing this letter come in from her, and we're like, wait a minute, I thought we were good. We hadn't even really interacted with her in 2 years.
So her letter was detailing some of those conversations from 2 years prior where we were talking about nuanced things 100%, but we always spoke of them in the sense of staying within the church, frankly, with her. And so that was sad because we had a long history with her, and it felt her letter felt really. She's a very authentic. She's like really fun girl, but also complicated. And her letter felt almost like typewritten or something. It didn't even feel like her. It was really odd. It
was strange. Yeah.
But it felt like betrayal to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That one hurt. The rest were a joke, but that one was just kind of like
the claim was that you what?
Yeah. What's the? I mean,
I don't even know. Just like talking about things that
tricky
aren't
stuff.
Traditional, I guess.
Yeah.
Probably. Yeah.
Which again is not grounds.
It wasn't ever like they did this or they did that. Yeah. It wasn't.
Yeah.
Okay. So this meeting, so that it kind of, we talked about the weakness of those arguments for one with them a bit, and we gave them. I had literally spent the entire week leading up to this meeting. I was so stressed.
Oh my gosh.
It is odd because yes, we weren't attending. Yes, we didn't really feel like that act would separate us from our families.
Right.
However,
our family
we did not want to be excommunicated.
It's the worst. We've been through it. It's the worst.
It sounds horrible.
I would say number one, I can't bear like our moms having to deal with the fact that we got excommunicated, how that would feel for them. Two, we didn't do anything. And so
just the principle of it, it's like, no, you can't do that to us. That's not fair.
So anyway, I kind of I'm not an attorney, but I do read a lot and I like to comprehend. So I read their books and I read their things.
A week off of work.
Literally took a week off of work that I should not have done.
We did that so much, by the way.
The business was struggling a bit. And here I am spending all this time navigating church discipline.
Well,
and family
we worked for
issues
years,
and friend issues.
Navigating. How should I write this text to make so their feelings aren't hurt? Or how should just so much of our business, like,
our creative energy that should have been put into the business was really going to navigating the fallout from our personal religious decisions.
Yeah.
So I had gone in there kind of prepared to say, and I can't remember exact wording now, it's been a little while, but essentially with apostasy, they are supposed to give you a warning instead of just go for the axe.
For sure.
And so, I was pleading with them, and I remember it was really hard because I felt like, they were kind of initially presenting it like we were given these letters and we have to act. We have no choice. We must, and then I had found what I felt like was a viable loophole for their predicament. And I was like, and our predicament. And I was like, well, listen, the handbook says that we should be given a warning before you excommunicate us. So can you please just give us a warning? We're not attending anymore. We're not trying to do anything. I actually came prepared to that meeting with statistics from Utah, with statistics from Knoxville. I did a survey. I asked around in Knoxville how many people had left in the area. I found as many people as I could And it was something like in the last 5 years, there were 60 or 70 individuals. And of those 60 or 70, we knew 10 of them or 5 of them, hardly any. And so, I understood their perspective. They thought we were a dangerous mole in Knoxville, pulling people away from the flock. And so I came in with my argument of, this is a church problem. This is not a Todd and Lindsay Knoxville problem.
Yeah. And between 2013 or even 2008, starting with Proposition 8.
Yeah.
Right.
The church the Mormon church has had massive hemorrhaging between 2008 and today.
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with the McCormicks.
Right.
No,
definitely didn't.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of pleading with them. I'm like, here's an out. Can't we just call this good, be done with this whole charade? We'll go on our merry way. You go on yours. And the more the meeting went on, it just felt like they were trying to figure out a way to make it happen.
It was so disturbing what he was doing. He was just frantically searching, there's got to be. And we're like, what the hell?
And I finally got so frustrated. And I'm not a confrontational person, but I finally got really frustrated. I'm like, it really seems like you're trying to find a way to make this happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, and finally, I think
Jeremy Reynolds called it a kangaroo court.
Oh yeah.
It's not real justice. It's not a sincere pursuit of truth.
Right.
It's a
just a
lynching.
Yeah.
It's a spiritual, social lynching.
Yeah.
And I mean that not just a homicide,
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
One little piece of the story that started this witch hunt that we haven't really said was crazy coincidence. Crazy coincidence. The week or within a week or two of us stopping attending, another large family of the Word stopped attending.
5 kids, one on a mission.
And
again, that's because it's happening all over the world.
Oh,
good friends of ours. It's actually the woman she joked about the wine with.
Yeah, just her.
Their family left. But so they, again, the ward, the stake, they're freaking out because that makes the 3rd large family in our ward to leave in a couple years.
Yeah.
And this is he was in the bishopric. His dad was the current elders quorum president or high priest group leader, whatever it was at the time. So it was a big blow to the ward to lose another 5 kids and their son was on a mission.
Yeah.
It was a big deal. We had no idea they even left. We found out they left the church because I bought a car from them. We show up at their house and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say her name, pulled her aside.
She just said, he's done. And we had a private conversation,
very private,
in her home, because she noticed that I wasn't wearing garments and she hadn't been for a long time. And so because of that, she was reaching out to me and kind of wanting to confide, because she was still attending and everything, but was, her husband was not.
Which was the extent of all religious conversations we ever had with them.
Yes, literally.
We talked business and we talked kids and
I was there doing a photo shoot or something and we had a little conversation.
So their whole family left at the same time. And that's why these spontaneous letters, I guess, started flowing into the bishopric,
Yeah.
So
do we go back again?
Well, there's one really critical part we need to tell.
This one?
It's this one. Yeah. And so I've kind of cornered them a little bit with this idea that we need a warning. And our bishop, who's a lawyer, was kind of like,
he was
telling the stake president. I mean, we're going to have to let him off the hook here.
And we had to tell the stake president, do you understand the dynamic here with this guy?
Oh, yeah.
He didn't. He's like, so wait, we explained the whole thing to him. So he started a business kind of like yours or, kind of that whole thing. And he had no idea.
Exactly like ours, using our vendors, using the knowledge.
And then he was a terminated for cause former employee, disgruntled former employee.
Right. Yeah, with
an extra grind.
With an extra grind.
Yes, exactly.
And did you notice that of the 6 letters, 5 come from that family and their best friends?
And they don't even live here anymore. There's no way. There's no way.
We were trying to help him see what was happening. He really wasn't seeing it yet.
Yeah.
But our bishop was kind of like, okay, we need to give him a warning. Until they remembered the 2017 incident. And then the stake president, he's like, oh, but there was that 2017
where
thing
Lindsay had given a talk they didn't like.
Where she was talking to these two girls and they felt like so.
Yeah.
You could just tell that part. You told us this at dinner.
This is your story to tell.
No, yeah. I mean, it pissed me off so much. Yeah, he gets his finger and he puts it in my face. And he's like, we might not be able to get him, but we can still get you. We can still get you, is what his words were. Stuck his finger in my face. And oh my gosh, twice.
Yeah.
When we left that night, I just lost it.
Why?
Well, I think I was just holding it all in of how that felt. Putting his finger in my face, telling me he can get me. Who the hell does he think he is?
In the name of Jesus, too.
Right.
Right? Yeah.
And then Todd realized, he realized how much he still had in him this respect for authority. Because he's like, wait a minute. I don't know if you recognized it right then, or if
I woke up and realized I made a huge mistake.
How did I let this man put his finger in my wife's face and disrespect her?
I sat there silent.
Yeah.
That was how strong my conditioning was, that this was a priesthood leader and that he was to be respected. And he's aggressively coming after my wife, and I sat there silent.
So I was abusive. Yeah.
Sorry that happened.
Yeah.
And Margie resigned the day after our excommunication. And, I don't think we had anything near that bad. But Margie, you can talk about why, even short of such an outrageous, egregious, violent communication, what was it for you, Margie?
Well, I don't need to. If you want me to, I can. But your story, I do feel like, something similar that I was able to it was tangible when we met with the stake president was this idea of, I think one of the first things he said was, I am going to be the one to excommunicate you.
Oh my gosh.
And that was before we were able to explain anything, talk about anything, so you get that sense it's a bit of a done deal. And there's a violence to it. There's an aggression to it. And I think that's what you were, one of the things likely that you were kind of feeling is this power. I have this power over you to destroy you. And guess what? I'm going to do it. I'm going to be the one. And it's so, it is for a lot of my life. I saw this version of the church that was warm.
Yes.
And
you don't see it.
Kind and service oriented. And, even if it's passive aggressive to the person, there's this presentation.
Oh yeah.
And it was I lifted up the rock and it was there was this whole rotting underside to it.
Yes.
And I couldn't unsee it.
Yes.
From that point on. And we can go there's so much about the meetings. We had a few meetings, as I remember, so many things about those meetings. It was rotten. It was all rotten. And I couldn't unsee it. I couldn't go back, not even for, And I think in the end, that's why I resigned in the end. But
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh my gosh. I'm sorry.
Sounds heavy.
Well, yours is worse. So, yeah.
This is a man who is jolly and fun and funny and whose son worked for us.
Nobody would have ever believed us.
I would, like you said, I just didn't even know that this existed in him or in the church or that they were capable of treating people like that. It was a shock.
We kept asking them why they are trying so hard. We are done going. We stopped attending. We're not going. Why?
There was no mercy. We had to corner them to get the train to stop.
It's ridiculous.
And they didn't agree to stop then.
No.
I talked them pleaded for over an hour for them to stop this.
Oh, to ask.
And I finally got them to agree to check with the area authority.
Yeah.
Because I was after laying out literally a case with proof and with arguments, And they agreed to ask the area authority. I still thought they were going to do it.
Yeah, we did.
And they said they were going to meet in a week after they talked to the area authority. And so we came back a week later.
Walked back into that
third
building.
week in a row. Sat down and shocked to find out that they were not going to go through with it.
Which is rare.
Very rare.
Once you're kind
This
of
is
on
rare.
the hook, it's going to happen.
And he said the area authority did have one question, though. Why do you care so much about your membership?
I hate that question.
Yeah.
Which was so insulting.
That's
I'm sure.
normal. Yeah.
Yeah.
Why do you care?
So
Everybody
insulting.
is asking us that. It's
Yeah. Why do you even care?
Right.
Yeah.
We can just kick you out.
But in a moment of kind of a little bit of justice or something, the stake president, after he told us the verdict, if you will, he said, "Now, tell me again. So you're saying this bishopric member, he wanted clarity on what he did, because he was clueless that everybody in the stake was clueless at what he had done. He was hiding it. It was his active job. It is what he was doing to support his family.
Yep.
But he kept trying to figure out if he was misunderstanding the severity of what we had just said. So he's doing something in the same industry? No, literally the exact same thing that he learned through our blood, sweat, and tears, because it took years to figure this out. We were doing something no one else in the printing industry was doing.
Yeah.
We were pioneers at what we did. We introduced something into the market. That's why it took off. So for someone to take your proprietary blood, sweat, and tears idea and
steal it.
Yeah.
Who was, I mean, this is a guy that was a close friend of ours. He was there when we announced the gender of our youngest. He was at our parties. We were double dating. We would go on business trips together. We were close. And we worked together for 2 or 3 years. I would have considered him probably my best friend at the time. And so, the hardest thing was seeing that side of the church that you mentioned and seeing what people are capable of. And I can at the same time have empathy because I know where it comes from. I know that they are scared to death and that they are misunderstanding. But it's super painful on this side. Super painful.
Yeah, especially with such an axe to grind, though. I mean, that's the kicker in the story, because
for him particularly, it was an act of vengeance, I do believe.
If it weren't him, I don't know that this would have even been a thing, coming about.
Right. He was clearly the instigator. So,
in our opinion,
yeah, possibly, allegedly.
So I want to talk about, kind of circle back to the Hinckley family kind of stuff, to the extent that we're comfortable talking about it. But so how has the membership thing and the church leadership thing played out really quickly, after that moment?
Yeah. I mean, I got asked that question by family members too. Like, why do you even care? And it was, things like that.
But
did you stay members? Did you end up getting excommunicated? Did you end up resigning? What happened?
No.
So we stayed members, but it was known we stopped attending in early 2019.
Well, and
so things came to a head with the family because it was official we weren't attending.
Yeah. Oh, right. But there was a gag order.
Going back to the excommunication hearing.
Yeah. He was like, don't talk. You can't.
Well, and another silly part was the definition or the discussion of what is public.
Oh my gosh.
Because the handbook says public opposition to the church, repeated and public opposition. And our argument was, we've had a few minor conversations with folks behind closed doors in our home. And our bishop, who is a very smart guy, was saying that's public. And we're just like, are you sure though? We probably mentioned John DeLynn. You've got people like John DeLynn who did that for 10 years with a podcast online.
We've never said anything public. Show me something public that I've said.
Right. Yeah, y'all weren't Facebooking. Y'all weren't like Nathan. Right?
We were not being Nathan.
No, we were not Nathaning. No.
We were opposite of Nathan in that regard.
There are people that I knew that were in the church that had said things about the prophets in those few years.
Absolutely.
Very negative things about the prophet publicly on their Facebook pages.
Right.
It's just like,
we really were as quiet and honestly timid as you can possibly be and leave the church. So it was so confusing. The whole
they want to
ordeal.
get you, they're going to get you, and they'll find a way to justify it. Yeah. So you had a gag order.
Yep.
Yeah. And we held to that until we did resign our membership.
What year?
Just recently, last year.
Last year, I think. Yeah.
Okay. So
and that's why we're here. Literally, we did keep the gag order. We did not speak, but we wanted to start. Honestly, it's when Nathan started speaking out.
Mm-hmm.
And he gave us courage.
Yeah.
We grew up a little bit, I feel like. We learned that it's okay to share your own story. It's okay to share your own ideas, even if your loved ones disagree with your ideas, or even if they're going to be sad that you hold different. That's not really an us problem. As much as I don't want them to be sad, that's really not, we should speak. And we were blessed, quote unquote, by Nathan being vocal.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're like, we should share our story. We should speak.
Yeah.
And in order to speak, we had to resign. So we resigned, and now we're speaking.
Yeah, because we had spoken to you years before.
Oh, yeah.
While
So we
it was
left that
going
part
on.
out.
Yeah, on the phone. And, you were like, I'll be there. Well,
I would have come to your excommunication. Yeah.
You were ready.
Yeah.
But, it got shut down. And
I'm glad.
And then,
it was better for...
Because I don't wish that on anybody.
No, that would have been terrible.
Yeah.
We didn't want our families to have to deal with that.
Yeah.
We didn't want to deal with that. I'm traumatic.
Yeah.
Who wants to go through that?
So really quickly, just to end, let's circle back to Nathan's bishop in 2014, 2015, and y'all are losing your faith.
Yeah.
What are you comfortable sharing about how you, Lindsay, leading out as someone who no longer believes, and, you, Todd, as an in-law, living here in Knoxville, Tennessee, with all your family and friends being faithful, devout Mormons, once family members, but specifically Nathan, start finding out you no longer believe.
Yeah.
What are you comfortable sharing? And you don't have to share anything about how that affected this Hinckley, close, connected, loving, unified family.
Yeah. No, it massively affected it. When I stopped going, or when I, stopped wearing garments and stopped going, it really caused a rift in the closeness of our family. There were, private conversation, a lot of private conversations happening. And I get that too, but it's hurtful. It's painful. When you find out things like that, Nathan told me a few things, and Nathan was,
he was rough on you guys.
He was rough. Yeah. I mean, he would send us, he can get a bit sarcastic and mean. And he would just, blast us. For a while, I was taking it from all sides in my, from my perspective, everyone kind of coming at me. And so I kind of gave Nathan to him. I'm like, okay, you got to deal with him, because I'm dealing with.
Well, you were dealing with parents and other siblings and things.
Yeah. It was very difficult to, I started really listening to like Julie Hanks and things like that, and just psychology and learning about psychology in general, right? And anxiety and all these things, and learned the term differentiation from Julie Hanks. And, just like trying to have that in our family, like trying to teach that, or like to just kind of, look at that and instead of everyone feeling that like they had to be the same exact to be in the club of the family. Because that's just, we always were, and we always were kind of the same. So it's new. It was totally new. Again, they didn't even know anyone that had left the church. We didn't back then. Right. And
unity is easy when everyone does the same thing and believes the same thing.
Oh yeah. 100%. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, there was about a year or so that we didn't super feel comfortable like going to things. And
2019, we felt pretty estranged. It was really uncomfortable to
I'm
gather.
not putting the blame on anyone.
No,
just
everybody's processing their stuff.
Right.
It was a hard time.
Again, I felt like I had to make other people feel comfortable. I took on their emotions instead of just allowing them to be like, I know this is hard, and you can process that with with someone that makes sense to process that with, how about, instead of having me kind of.
Well, the hard part, and I'm sure many of your guests share this, probably all of them, is you're going through the hardest thing of your own life, upsetting your very foundations, and you're ripping your mother's heart out at the same time. And so you're bearing their pain and your own, and it's hard. And Lindsay is such an empathetic person and loving, and wants everybody to be happy and healthy and friendly. And it was really, really challenging to watch her navigate those complex situations where people are, I know it's heartbreaking for those that remain. It's devastating. They never dreamed, nor did we, that this situation would happen. So it was really difficult years.
Yeah. But very vindicating when Nathan called me and texted me that day. So
and that was just...
This was 2 years ago on April Fool's Day. He texted me in the morning.
Which is so Nathan.
I know. He's
the 2023?
2023. Yeah. He texted me in the morning and he said, "Hey, I'm sorry about how I treated you when you left the church." And I was like, gosh, because we knew what that meant. And it was huge. Yeah. So.
Because you were a lone Hinckley out of the church for how long? At least out of belief for.
Well, yeah, that was like 8 years probably.
That's
but like,
hard.
Yeah, and hadn't
to
been
be
going.
the only family member in a close-knit Mormon family for 8 years.
And I would have never dreamed it was Bishop Nathan.
And we're living so close too. Everybody's within an hour or two, and so it's not like they're just across the country and you don't really notice. It's like in our faces.
You're all in each other's business.
Yes.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah, literally.
Yes, there was a lot of literal business too.
Yeah. So it was really healing in a lot of ways to just have somebody understand it.
I think, do you remember what you texted, not to put you on the spot, but do you remember what you texted back to him?
Mm-hmm.
Because I was so moved by it. Because it made me feel like the way you responded was the way you wish someone had responded to you. That's what it felt like to me.
Okay.
But do you remember the gist of how you responded to him when he said that?
I think I just said, you were in a spot, you were in a space at that time, and I understand that. And thank you so much. That really means a lot to me. I think that it was something like that. Did you read it recently?
Kind of I love you no matter what kind of thing.
Oh, was it?
I think.
Yeah, it probably was me being the way that I wished I had gotten.
Yeah. 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 And so everyone, next episode is going to be Nathan's story. How would a bishop end up leaving the church and ruining his Mormon daughter's
simple wedding,
his daughter's Mormon wedding, right?
Right.
And it's a powerful story, and Kaylee's really, powerful communicator too. So
she's amazing.
Yeah. So now it's 2 out of 4 Hinckley children who are and my guess is in 2025 it's still hard on the family, right?
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. I mean, it's hard on
you and them, meaning everyone. Nathan, you, everyone. It's hard on the Hinckley family.
Yep.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I want so bad and there's glimpses and everyone is trying, I think, to have that Hinckley bond again.
I think in some ways it's everybody's grown a lot from it, everyone across the board. And it's definitely gotten better for us, time and healing. And there's been beautiful moments with each of them, honestly, where we've come together and people have stood up for us or vice versa. And we have, so
yeah.
And I think, it's going to take some time because these things are really, really hard for it to be, but we are personally in a good spot with everyone in the family and not the same, but in a good spot.
Yeah. And just kind of a redefining of the relationships, I guess, because we don't have that in common. But, with the Hinckley family, it never was about the church, in my opinion. It was music It was games and fun, and it that really never was what bond. We didn't sit around and read the scriptures. It wasn't about church. It wasn't about Mormonism at all. And so really it shouldn't change our relationship, but I get it too. I get why it does, but it's just too bad.
Well, I'll just never stop saying that it's the sure sign of a cult if an otherwise healthy marriage or an otherwise healthy family is divided because of religion. Mm-hmm. That's the sure sign of a cult, because a healthy religion doesn't ruin an otherwise healthy marriage or an otherwise healthy family system. It just doesn't.
Right.
Yeah. So really quickly, I don't even know if y'all have data on this, but like it would be normal for the Hinckley family to blame the in-law for being the reason why, Lindsay
there was some of that.
left. I'm not
Did Nathan
asking.
comment on that yesterday? He would know.
Maybe.
He was the insider at the time.
But I don't even know if you know, and it doesn't matter. You don't have to even say it. But I just want to acknowledge that.
I think it went both ways.
But I think your family, Todd, would likely blame her. You know what I mean?
Well, and in all honesty, I think they're both right.
Yeah.
It was because I look at myself, I could have never left the church without Lindsay because of the combination of the two of us. We push ourselves in really healthy, just enlarging ways. We have constantly helped each other grow. And I think I would have been stuck in my rut. And I think likewise, I bring something to Lindsay that helped her process this, this transition. So I think both sides are right, but we did it hand in hand, and we did it together, and we challenged each other along the way and talked it through. And we took our decision very, very seriously and very slowly because we knew it was important and life-changing. And I'm a really methodical person. Hinkley's are super fast, but Lindsay waited for me to do my own processing. But it was, it was an amazing process. And even through all the hard times we've had, the growth we've had has been amazing together and individually. So I wouldn't want to do it again, but I would do it again if I had to, It's been a lot of work.
Yep.
Well, I can't thank y'all enough for being willing to tell your story. And it's still relevant in 2025. I'm not claiming any special information, but it's my perception based on what I've seen on social media that Julie Hanks is being targeted as a potential candidate for excommunication. Yeah. Again, that's just my opinion. I'm not claiming any special information. And Michelle Stone of 132 Problems YouTube channel, it's my perception and not claiming special information that she's being targeted for excommunication. LGBT, same-sex married Mormons in 2025 are still being targeted for excommunication. And my understanding is that memos have been put out telling bishops and stake presidents to kind of ramp up excommunications because, again, the church doesn't look at their own causes for people leaving. They just want to look at people leaving as the cause.
Right.
And so what's the answer? Well, you just got to run out everyone who's questioning or leaving or talking to other people. And so, but I just think I've always said it, excommunications are barbaric, they're medieval, and they need to stop, because they're violent.
Yeah, and changing the name of it doesn't change the act.
Change what it is.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. And I know you're trying to make your family situation super healthy. So there's risk involved in you even coming on and telling your story now, which for me is very laudable because it's still very courageous. Even though y'all aren't in the church anymore, your family's going to learn about this the day it comes out. And I know you love them and you want only improved relationships with them.
Yeah.
So
only a few short years ago, there is no way we would have ever done this for that very reason. But we really have had a shift of perspective, which is we have a voice. We support them 100% sharing their beliefs. And they have gone on some LDS podcasts. And that's great.
Yeah.
And I do hope that everyone in this space, Mormonism has such a tricky thing. All religion does, right? The kind of the people leaving and the people staying and how we navigate that. I just hope people leave space for each other to be who they are and believe what they believe. And, I hope that no one in our families or our friends would look at this as us as a violent act against their beliefs, because that's not at all what it's about. In fact, our very best friends are in our ward to this day.
Yep.
We have raised our kids together. And they're
faithful Mormons.
Yes.
Faithful Mormons.
Yeah.
And
you're not trying to get them out.
No, never, ever have.
Yeah.
And Lindsay texted her on her way here to tell her, to remind her, she already knew we're doing this. And she gave her support and love and space to have this, just as Lindsay would on the other side. I think their relationship is such a powerful example that we don't have to be against each other. We can have completely different perspectives.
Well, something I'd always say or think, like the way I could think of it was, I didn't leave the church at you. I didn't leave the church at anybody.
That's
like
powerful.
It was just our path. And so
that's really powerful. That's good. I've never heard that before.
I had to learn it for myself because, it was being told that I was, it was kind of feeling like I was hurting all these people, but I had to just come to that. Like, no, this is my thing and I didn't do it to you.
Well, thank y'all. Lindsay and Todd McCormick, thank you so much for coming on Mormon Stories.
Thank you.
This is a great addition. And we're glad we came all the way from Utah to Knoxville to do this series.
We've been wanting to do this for a very long time.
Yes.
Yeah, I know.
We've been talking about it for about a year.
know.
Yeah, we want, and, we'd love for our kids to be able to watch this someday to kind of just know the story.
Yeah.
It's a good way to have it all out there and, help someone out there that might.
And we love what you two do and appreciate it. It's, I remember when Lindsay first got into Mormon Stories and how healing it was. She was having to deal with a lot more of the in-your-face realities of leaving because of the proximity of family and where we live. And so it was really, what you do is so invaluable to people that leave. And I hope that was part of our motivation, is maybe us finally stop hiding under a rock, stop pretending like we're still Mormon when we're not, just own it and be authentic. We've been watching others be vocal, and that's helped us so much for a long time. So it was time for us to finally stick our neck out a little bit, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, thank you
so much.
Thank you. Super powerful. Appreciate it. And this isn't all. Tune in for next episode where Lindsay's brother, Nathan Hinckley, Bishop Nathan Hinckley, who is as faithful and as devout as they come in Tennessee, right? Along with his daughter, Kaylee, have their own faith journey that ends in Nathan ruining his daughter's Mormon wedding. And it's a great story. So check that out. Come back. And I'll just end by thanking our donors. We flew here and we had to help. Of course, thanks to Nathan for helping us settle this up. But thanks to our donors that allow us to do things like fly here to Knoxville to record these episodes and that just support us and our staff. Thank you if you're a donor. We appreciate it. If you're not a donor and you value this type of content, if you want to see it continue, just go to mormonstories.org, click on the donate button, become a monthly donor. We don't do product placement or sponsorships. Our ad revenue is relatively minor compared to our donations. So we live on your donations. So if you value this content, please become a monthly or an annual donor. And also other ways you can support us is by liking this episode, subscribing on all the different channels to our content, sharing it, commenting on it. We love your emails, so email us at mormonstories@gmail.com. And if you want to be a guest on Mormon Stories Podcast, all you got to do is go to mormonstories.org, click on the button to apply, record a direct 3-minute video telling us why you want to be on the show. Don't just link to some other random video that isn't directly related to why you think you'd be a good fit for our show. Fill out the application, and we'd love to consider you to be on the show. All right. Anything else, Margie? All right. Well, thanks again for joining us today, all the way from Knoxville, Tennessee. Thanks again, Lindsay and Todd. Be good to each other. Be kind to each other. We'll see you all again soon on another episode of Mormon Stories Podcast.